Hi everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Welcome back to the channel.
Welcome to Novels Wonderland. Naruto, Path to Godhood, Chapter 287 to 311, 287, The Silent Grief. 848 words. The cemetery of Hidden Sand Village lay in a canyon at the village's eastern edge. Whether because of the terrain or the tombstones, the place always felt cold and gloomy. 4-year-old Sasori sat on the frigid ground, staring blankly at the photographs on the grave marker, his small body trembling. All year, he had clung to every possible fantasy, watching the horizon from the village gate, waiting for his parents to return. He refused to go back to the empty house. At night, when darkness swallowed him after he flicked the switch, he could not stop the tears. They'll be back very soon, everyone told him. But even if it were a lie, he wanted to believe it. All I needed was that one sentence, why did you have to tear it apart? Sasori remembered the tune-in instructor's roar that morning, your parents are dead. My son died because of your grandmother, why aren't you dead too? Why had the kind teacher suddenly become so cruel? Sasori did not know, nor did he want to. The only words echoing in his mind were, your parents are dead. Gazing at the icy grave, his nose stung, heat clogged his throat, his chest ached, and tears welled up. He pressed his palms tightly against his eyes, but the tears slipped through regardless. Suddenly, he stood and slammed the faded assembly puppet he had been clutching against the ground. The puppet hit with a splat, shattering into pieces scattered in every direction. The next second, regret washed over him. He bent down to collect the shards, but his foot slipped on a stone, and he crashed to the ground. Ignoring the pain, he scrambled for the pieces, but eventually gave up and sat wailing, broken and small against the expanse of the graveyard. From nearby, Ibizo watched silently, sighing softly before approaching. Granduncle, is grandmother dead? No, she was taken to Konoha, she should return in a few days. Sasori rose slowly. Don't tell her I already know my parents are dead, he said, his tone stiff, devoid of feeling. I understand, Ibizo whispered, sighing deeply. Sister, come back soon, he prayed silently. Meanwhile, Hidden Sand Village's negotiation party finally departed for Konohagakure. The venue was not in the Hokage building. Though impressive, it stood at the village center. If anything went wrong, Hiruzen Sarutobi would face censure from every faction, and outrage from the villagers. Thus, the meeting was placed on Konoha's eastern edge, near the prison, convenient for the Anbu to escort the third Kazekage and Chiyo Iwakura. When Hayashi, Jiraiya, and the others arrived, many jonin were already waiting outside. After greeting the guards, the four walked toward the center of the hall. The sand envoys had not yet arrived. Inside, besides the Hokage, sat several Konoha elders. You're here, Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded to the four, speaking little on such a solemn occasion. Utatane Koharu shot a glance at Hayashi, silently telling him to find a seat. Seeing Jiraiya, Sakumo, and Orochimaru take their places, Hayashi knew better than to sit alone. A mascot must know its place, even standing like a lackey was part of the role. He politely declined Aunt Koharu's offer and took his corner. That's Kagami's son, Konoha's youngest jonin. Quiet whispers reached Hayashi's ears. Yes, Utatane Koharu murmured to the elder beside her. He distinguished himself in the land of rain and the land of rivers, impressive, isn't it? Her pride was clear, a stranger might have thought Hayashi was her own son. Ahem, the third Hokage coughed lightly, eyes forward, but the message was clear. After his cough, the elders fell silent, though a few curious glances still swept toward Hayashi's corner. Had it not been a political compromise, Hiruzen Sarutobi would never have formed the elders' council. One village was hardly enough for him and his 3 senior advisors, let alone a council drawn from every clan. All authority now rested with the third, yet who could guarantee the future, or the fourth, would face no problems. Not every Hokage possessed the strength of the first and second, the third's political skill alone was formidable. Watching the elders, the Hokage's gaze turned cold. 5 more minutes passed before a Konoha ninja entered. Lord Third, the Suna envoys have been brought through the side gate, as you ordered, avoiding the main entrance. Good. Bring them in. Hiruzen nodded. Moments later, 5 sand envoys, escorted by 2 Konoha jonin, entered the hall. Third Hokage, after so many years, you remain as distinguished as ever. The sand leader removed his straw hat, revealing an aged face. Had I known Elder Masa himself would come, I would have greeted you at the gate, the third Hokage replied, chuckling and tapping ash from his pipe. Spare me the courtesy. Elder Masa of Suna cut straight to the point. Where are our third Kazekage and Elder Chiyo? No rush, we have much to discuss, such as how much you are prepared to offer for their release. The third Hokage responded with his kindly, amiable smile, concealing the weight of the situation perfectly. Chapter 288, 288, The First Day of Negotiations. 935 words. When poor, shelve the dispute, when rich, claim it's been yours since antiquity. That line could be called the Celestial Dynasty's foreign policy creed, yet somehow third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi had mastered it perfectly. Konoha may have been only 30 years old, but compared to the Senju clan stretching back 1,000 years, 30 years seemed fleeting. Every word from the third dripped with the implication that Tsunagakure was a nation of upstarts with no historical depth. The Sand Shinobi bristled. By that logic, they might as well hand over the entire village. After all, this land used to be Ucha territory. And yet the third Hokage, with his nickname a monkey, his appearance, and even his summoned beast, could still command this kind of audacity. The moment his words left the Sand Envoy's mouth, Danzo bristled. Did they think every Konoha ninja was a polite pushover? The irate warhawk jabbed a finger at the Sand delegation, roaring that they were a pack of savages. Tsunagakure could take no more. Yes, they were the defeated nation, weaker than Konoha, but pride still burned in their hearts. Must Konoha smear them with stereotypes? Which of the four great nations hadn't been battered by the Land of Fire at some point? Had this happened at the Five Kage Summit, it might have drawn nods of approval, especially from the third Tsukikage. But here, in Konoha, the argument fell flat. Utatane Koharu, seated to the right, cheerfully reminded the Sand that they were simply being argumentative, and even offered to hire them at high wages. Konoha's construction projects needed exactly that kind of talent. The Sand Ninja fired back just as sharply. If Konoha would release the third Kazekage and Chiyo, they'd gladly work, argue or lay bricks, anything for the job. Homura Mitakado solemnly denounced the Sand for wishful thinking, wondering aloud what substances they might have been using to hallucinate. The negotiation devolved into a noisy marketplace, and by dusk, no useful points had been settled. Yet everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. The third had foreseen this. Konoha's demands were simply too steep for Tsunagakure to concede. Understanding did not mean compromise. Back in the First Great Ninja War, Konoha had fought 4-1 to maintain its hegemony. But that victory was hollow. Origin Chi was grievously wounded, and the village had needed years to recover. Add internal chaos, and Konoha had gained little. Many territories occupied before the war were only returned in name. The third Hokage remembered it all. His teacher, the second Hokage, had died in that war. Now Konoha had won again, with strength to spare, and old and new scores could be settled together. The third was in his prime, decisive, and unyielding, a ninja hero in every sense. Meanwhile, Tsunagakure began to falter. Konoha's demands were impossible. Whoever signed the treaty would become the village's eternal sinner. With the third Kazekage captive, no one dared make a decision. Ibizo dared not intervene, so the elder stayed away. Salmon dared not either, yet as the highest-ranking elder, he had no choice but to attend. His throat hoarse from arguing, he gulped another full cup, his sixth that afternoon, and still felt parched. I'll say it again, no. Konoha shows zero sincerity. This is outright robbery. That sentence had been his refrain all afternoon. Everyone knows how this war started. We went to subdue the Land of Rain, only to be ambushed by Tsunagakure. We were forced to fight back and lost too many ninja. Our material consumption was severe. I trust you agree our demands are hardly excessive. Once again, the third restated Konoha's stance. The village was the party in the right. And so the two sides sank back into endless bickering, each sentence sparking a fresh quarrel. Day one of negotiations collapsed. Konoha refused to retreat, and Tsunagakure would not accept the price. Who knows when this will end? Jiraiya yawned, stretching. No idea. We've been standing all afternoon, let's grab dinner first, Orochimaru rasped. The four agreed. Over food, they rehashed the meeting. Though they hadn't seen the treaty, they had pieced together the gist. The Sand delegation won't sleep tonight, Jiraiya observed. Sleep? They'll bust their guts trying to see the third Kazekage in prison. None of them dare decide on concessions, they fear the blame. By the way, doesn't the ransom figure for the third Kazekage and Chiyo sound familiar? I swear I've heard it somewhere, Jiraiya mused after a sip of sake. Sakumo grinned. Of course it's familiar, that's exactly what the second Hokage asked for the tailed beasts. Seeing Hayoshi's blank expression, Orochimaru explained. When the first Hokage captured 8 of the 9 tailed beasts, he meant to gift them at the Five Kage Summit to maintain peace. The second Hokage vetoed that and told the villagers to buy them. Today's ransom matches his original asking price. It used to be in the history books, but the Ninja Academy cut it. Your generation never learned it, no surprise. Hayashi had actually seen it in the manga, he just hadn't expected the third to pick that exact number. The twisted irony was unmistakable, the first Kazekage never paid, yet today the third Kazekage would. He wondered how the strongest Kazekage would feel about settling Granddaddy's tab. All right, let's head back. Next round starts at 8, Sakumo said, rising. Hayashi sighed, he could already picture the next day of talks. After all, the essence of humanity seemed to be being a parrot. ______. Milestones. 100 power stones equals 1 bonus chapter. 200 power stones equals 3 bonus chapters. By becoming a patron you get access to chapters way ahead of web novel. patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 289, 289, The Treaty Signed. 883 words. 2 days later, after dozens of hours of intense negotiation, the marathon of bickering finally drew to an end. Third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi, seated comfortably, smiled as he handed over a pre-prepared document. HMPH. Masa, leader of Tsunagakure, snorted lightly, picked up the pen, and signed without hesitation. Why so straightforward? Naturally, he had consulted with the third Kazekage the night before. The third Kazekage, starved after days without proper food and exhausted from the relentless demands of the ninja interrogation squad, had whispered urgently, "Sister, go boldly forward, don't look back." He could endure no more. If the negotiations continued, he might become the first Kage in history to starve while imprisoned. And as for the ransom? Leave it for later, he trusted his skill and knowledge of political leverage. Hidden Cloud and Iwagakure were still engaged in conflict. Once he returned, he could likely get them to offset some of Tsunagakure's losses. Dragging this out only risked greater suffering for his village. So he had no choice but to approve Masa signing on his behalf. With the backing of the third Hokage, Shaman felt no stiffness in his legs or fatigue in his back and quickly coordinated with Hiruzen Sarutobi. With the signature finalized, the war between Konoha and Tsunagakure was officially declared over. Ding! Hayashi, standing just outside the main hall, heard the long-awaited announcement. Congratulations to the host for helping Konoha secure victory in the Second Great Ninja War. Hayashi smiled softly, a quiet warmth in his expression. But before he could dwell on it, Masa's voice rang from behind. Where are our Kazekage and Elder Chiyo? No need to worry. You will meet them soon, Hiruzen Sarutobi replied with a faint smile. He beckoned Orochimaru over and whispered, go and escort the Kazekage and Chiyo from Konoha prison. Yes, Orochimaru replied curtly, ignoring both the Elder Council and Tsunagakure representatives. He departed toward the venue's main entrance without delay. Masa refused any offer from the third Hokage for a tour of Konoha, understanding the embarrassment a defeated nation would feel paraded through the village. The safest course was to wait for the escort to bring the Kazekage and Chiyo back to him. 20 minutes passed. During this time, Hiruzen leisurely brewed 2 cups of tea. Konoha's Elder Council visibly relaxed. Though not all profits would land in their pockets, as Konoha was the clear beneficiary, strategically they knew they stood to gain much. Soon, Orochimaru returned. The Kazekage and Chiyo have been handed over to the Konoha ninja outside. Well done. The third Hokage drank his tea in a single gulp. Then Masa, according to our agreement, Konoha's forces will escort you and depart after crossing the Land of Fire border. Any other instructions? HMPH. Let's go. I hope Hokage-sama doesn't burst his gut over the ransom and supplies, Masa muttered before departing to meet Konoha's escort unit. Meeting adjourned, Hiruzen Sarutobi declared, clapping hands. The ninja and Anbu outside acknowledged silently. Orochimaru, most eager to resume his experiments, led the way, followed by Hayashi, Sakumo, and Jiraiya. The Hokage and Elder Council remained seated, understanding that the next battle was internal, disputes over distribution of profits. It promised to be another long struggle. Hayashi stepped into the sunlight, shielding his eyes, observing the cheerful faces of the assembled ninja. He sighed. Only now did he fully understand why the Third Great Ninja War had erupted so shortly after the Second. Victorious nations always demanded too much, defeated nations were forced into ruin. Tsunagakure could attempt to shift losses onto Iwagakure, but Iwagakure itself was defeated by Konoha. No ally could prevent this exploitation. Tsunagakure had no choice but to shoulder its despair, unable to repay the debt, only sinking deeper. Even Danzo had openly declared, "We must search every pocket in Sunagakure and find the money." Hayashi recognized the pattern. This treaty was a setup for the next war, an economic stranglehold designed to provoke conflict years later, just like the Treaty of Versailles in his past life. How long could this peace last? In the manga, such treaties faltered within 3 to 4 years, giving rise to the Third Great Ninja War. Hayashi realized that while his actions had expedited the Second War's end, the time gained was negligible. Without persuading Hiruzen to ease the terms or dismantle Sunagakure now, the pattern was inevitable. Hayashi's attention shifted as Sakumo Hatake nodded toward a group of ninja in Fan Clan uniforms, huddled with Sunagakure forces. "Oh, by the way, Hayashi, your escort unit is entirely comprised of your family members," Sakumo remarked casually. Hayashi nodded, quietly wondering how many would return alive. Sakumo then turned to lighten the mood. "So, how did your blind date go yesterday, senior?" "Don't even mention it," Sakumo pouted. "It was chaotic, like a fan gathering gone wild." Hayashi laughed softly. After all, it was the blind date of the famous White Fang of Konoha. "You must have many admirers, senior. Being overwhelmed is inevitable." Sakumo blushed faintly. "Hey, Hayashi, why are you teasing me? You're hardly inexperienced yourself. How long have you been single, by the way?" Sakumo pouted further. "Don't you know it's impolite to ask someone's age casually?" Hayashi merely smiled, shaking his head, the corner of his mouth tugged in quiet amusement. Chapter 290, Little Black. 1261 words. After parting ways with the White Fang halfway home, Uchiha Hayashi continued on alone, his gaze lingering briefly on Sakumo's slightly flushed face. It seemed the man was fully prepared to keep participating in the matchmaking efforts, no matter how awkward they became. At times, Hayashi genuinely could not understand it. Someone as strong, composed, and handsome as Sakumo should not have struggled to find a partner in his younger years, yet he had ended up relying on arranged introductions. Thinking it over, Hayashi concluded that Sakumo was probably never short on choices. That kind of person had to be careful. One wrong decision, and regret followed for life. After all, many people looked good in their youth, only to grow increasingly unpleasant with age. There was no need to look far for examples. Just look at Sarutobi Asuma and that thick beard of his. Then another thought crossed Hayashi's mind. What? The third Hokuge's wife, Sarutobi Biwako, was not pregnant yet? Yet Yuhi Shinku's wife already was. As Hayashi passed through the commercial street, he even spotted the couple shopping for baby supplies together. The scene was gentle and warm, filled with quiet happiness. Curious, Hayashi tilted his head slightly and glanced at her abdomen. The loose clothing made it impossible to tell she was already 2 months along. Still, by his estimation, Yuhi Kurenai would likely be born sometime around May or June of the following year. What a pity. Such a beautiful woman, paired so early. If only Shisui had been born sooner. Hayashi coughed lightly and dismissed the thought. In any case, with the war finally over, a widespread baby boom across the village was inevitable. When he returned home, Hayashi did not bother closing the door. Instead, he pulled over a chair and sat down casually. On the windowsill, a crow held a tiny watering can, diligently tending to a flower pot. During the summer, it had eaten watermelon and absent-mindedly spat seeds into the soil. To its delight, melon sprouts had grown. Ever since then, the bird had taken its duties seriously, watering and fertilizing the plant daily. As for the fertilizer, the source was obvious. Bird droppings were plentiful, natural, and effective. Whether that was comforting or horrifying depended on who you asked. Hayashi found it horrifying. He sighed inwardly. This crow, known as Little Black, was one he had adopted 2 years ago near Uzumaki Maito's grave. When Hayashi was sent to the battlefield, he had entrusted its care to Uzumaki Kushina. That decision, in hindsight, had been questionable. Kushina could barely take care of herself, let alone a bird with a strange temperament. Hayashi still remembered her bold declaration at the time. One hand braced against the wall, the other on her hip, she had confidently proclaimed, "Little Black, I promise I'll raise you big, fat, and shiny." Less than a week later, the starving crow had been forced to fend for itself. Living off potato chips alone was not sustainable. Since then, Little Black had developed a deep-seated fear of Kushina and immediately flew off whenever it sensed her presence. After watching the bird for a moment and losing interest, Hayashi shifted his attention to the table and reached for a scroll. Suddenly, Little Black stopped watering. Its posture straightened as it turned sharply toward the entrance, alert and focused. Hayashi smiled faintly but did not put the scroll down. A short while later, a familiar figure appeared outside the door. Ucha Fugaku. So it was the young clan leader himself. Hayashi had half expected Ucha-san to come personally. It seemed his influence was not quite enough to warrant that level of attention. Young clan leader, it's been a while, Hayashi said calmly. What brings you here today? Fugaku frowned slightly. I told you before, don't call me that. Just call me Fugaku. Have 2 years really made us that distant? If we are being technical, you're already a jonin, while I'm only a special jonin. I should be calling you senior. Do you really want that? Hayashi laughed and raised his hands in surrender. All right, all right. Since you insist, and since you are older than me, I'll call you Brother Fugaku. He gestured toward the room. Come in. I'll make some tea. Fugaku stepped inside and glanced around before sighing. I told you long ago to live with me. You refused and insisted on staying in a place this small. You're a hero of the clan. Anyone who doesn't know better would think my father was deliberately mistreating you. Hayashi smiled without responding. He prepared 2 cups of tea, handed one to Fugaku, and kept the other for himself. As they talked, Hayashi noticed how much Fugaku had matured over the past 2 years. The battle at the daimyo's residence had clearly changed him. He was no longer the youth who only dreamed of rushing into war. Eventually, Fugaku's patience ran thin, and he brought up the real purpose of his visit. Hayashi, he said seriously. Right now, you are the strongest among the younger generation of our clan. For this escort mission, most of the clan hopes you'll participate. They want to witness the strength of Konoha's lightning firsthand. So that was it. A display of strength. Hayashi stood up, his expression eager, but after a moment, he hesitated and shook his head, looking conflicted. Fugaku noticed immediately. What's wrong? Did something happen? Brother Fugaku, I'm an Ucha too. Of course I want to go, Hayashi said sincerely. But you know that Mikoto was injured during the war. She's still recovering and remains hospitalized. She hasn't been transferred back to the clan? We have skilled medical ninja. They can't treat her condition, Hayashi replied. Even the Konoha hospital couldn't. Fugaku's expression darkened. Then what can be done? You know I studied under Lady Tsunade for a time. Given our history with the Senju, it wasn't easy, but I begged her. She agreed to examine Mikoto. The surgery is tomorrow. I can't leave. Fugaku fell silent. There was nothing wrong with the reasoning. The timing was simply unfortunate. Hearing Mikoto's name repeatedly stirred a vague memory. The last time Fugaku had seen her, she was only around 10 years old. Even if she had potential, she had not yet grown into it. Still, Hayashi's concern was unmistakable. After a brief pause, Hayashi continued, tapping his teacup lightly. It's not that I don't want to go. I truly can't spare the time. Besides, it's only escorting Tsunagakure forces out of the land of fire. There shouldn't be any real danger. Next time there's a risky mission, call me without hesitation. Silence settled between them. Finally, Fugaku spoke carefully. But this mission may involve combat. He stopped abruptly. The air seemed to shift for just a moment. This was Hayashi's genjutsu at work. He could not manipulate thoughts like Koto Amatsukami, but planting a brief false memory lasting a couple of seconds was effortless for him. When Fugaku returned home, he would remember that he had never said those words. As for whether Uchiyama could detect it, the answer was no. Unless Fugaku's memories were directly examined, which only the Yamanoka clan could do, and there was no reason to involve them over something so minor. If an ambush occurred later, the blame could not fall on Hayashi. After all, no one could fault him for information that was never clearly stated. ____. Join my Patreon for chapters in advance. New Moon with Face. Search ZPHYR or use link patreon.com/ZPHYR. Send power stones to Smirking Face. Chapter 291, Quiet Growth. 1046 words. After Fugaku left, Ucha Hayashi immediately shut the front gate and returned to his chair. All the excuses and even that brief genjutsu had been used for a single reason. He did not want to burn bridges. The words of the founding father echoed clearly in his mind. Reduce your enemies. Multiply your friends. Hayashi's strength had not yet reached the level where he could afford to ignore consequences. Until then, caution mattered more than pride. Making enemies recklessly was no different from digging one's own grave. Still, avoiding enemies did not mean following along blindly. Jumping into a pit you could already see was not bravery. It was suicide. If even Hyuga Hayashi could sense something was wrong, how could the third Hokage be unaware? And if the third knew, then Danzo certainly knew as well. With Danzo's temperament, if he deliberately leaked information and set the Uchiha up as bait, anyone who followed along would simply be walking into death. People often underestimated Tsunagakure simply because they had lost the war, or because the third Kazekage and Chiyo had been detained for years. That kind of thinking was foolish. No matter how weakened they were, they remained one of the 5 great nations. No single clan could face that kind of force head-on. If the situation truly collapsed, Hayashi was confident he could protect himself. But could he abandon the rest of the clan? If he did, everything he had built would crumble instantly. The reputation of Konoha's lightning would become a joke. A so-called hero who fled while his own people bled. Public opinion had crushed Sakuma once before. Hayashi had no intention of repeating that history. Yet he could not tell Fugaku the truth. The man had come humbly and sincerely. Rejecting him outright would have meant open hostility. Unwilling to cross that line, Hayashi had searched for an unassailable excuse and settled on Mikoto's injury. If massive losses occurred later, no one could pin the blame on him. After all, Fugaku had never explained the clan's true plan. In the end, it was still a matter of strength. Hayashi exhaled slowly, then recalled the notification he had received earlier. By assisting Konoha during the Second Great Ninja War, he had completed a major objective. He had not checked the system in a long time. Not because he did not want to, but because earning points had become increasingly inefficient. As his strength grew, defeating Chunin no longer yielded rewards. Only Jonin still provided returns, and elite Jonin were not enemies one encountered casually. Still, this was a full-scale war contribution. The reward should be substantial. With that thought, Hayashi opened the translucent interface. Host, Uchiha Hayashi. Village, Konohagakure. Age, 12. Overall Power Index, Elite Jonin Tier, approaching Kage Tier. Chakra, LV 14, 3,406 500,000. Taijutsu, LV 13, 500, 300,000. Shuriken Jutsu, LV 12, 600, 150,000. Hand Seals, LV 13, 400, 300,000. Ninjutsu, LV 12, 500, 150,000. Genjutsu, LV 14, 611, 500,000. Wind Release, LV 13, 600, 300,000. Fire Release, LV 13, 400, 300,000. Lightning Release, LV 14, 589, 500,000. Water Release, LV 12, 0 to 150,000. Earth Release, LV 12, 0 to 150,000. Sealing Techniques, LV 10, 0 to 30,000. Yang Release, LV 11, 0 60,000. Yin Release, LV 13, 0 300,000. Elemental Fusion, locked. Sharingan, 3 Tomo. Remaining Ninja Points, 1,412,410. Levels 11 to 13 corresponded to Jonin Tier. 14 to 16 were classified as Kage Tier. From Hayashi's own experience, level 13 represented Elite Jonin, while level 14 was only a threshold. Strong, but not yet truly monstrous. Out of all his attributes, only Chakra Capacity, Genjutsu, and Lightning Release had crossed into that boundary. They were his core strengths. Taijutsu, once his strongest suit, now lagged slightly behind. That was why he struggled to keep up with fighters like Sakumo or Orochimaru in pure close combat. Wind Release, Fire Release, and Hand Seals remained Elite Jonin level. Yin Release had reached the same tier thanks to the amplification provided by the 3 Tomo Sharingan. Everything stemmed from the Uchiha bloodline. Shuriken Jutsu, Water Release, and Earth Release were merely standard Jonin level. They rarely saw serious use in battle. The most awkward were Yang Release and Sealing Techniques. One barely qualified as special Jonin level. The other hovered around Chunin. The reason was simple. He lacked talent in sealing, and there had never been an urgent need to push it. Still, with his body entering its natural growth phase, chakra reserves and physical ability would continue to rise on their own. Hoarding points served no purpose. This world produced monsters at an absurd pace. Elite Jonin and even borderline Kage level strength meant little in the long run. Itachi awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan at 13. Naruto and Sasuke reached 6 paths power before adulthood and reshaped the world itself. Reality often surpassed fiction. With that in mind, Hayashi did not hesitate. Taijutsu upgraded to level 14. Wind release upgraded to level 14. Fire release upgraded to level 14. After the surge of data settled, the interface refreshed. Host, Uchiha Hayashi. Village, Konohagakure. Age, 12. Overall power index, upper quasi-Kage tier. Chakra, LV14, 3406 500,000. Taijutsu, LV14, 0 500,000. Shuriken Jutsu, LV12, 600 150,000. Hand Seals, LV13, 400 300,000. Ninjutsu, LV13, 0 300,000. Genjutsu, LV14, 611 500,000. Wind Release, LV14, 0 500,000. Fire Release, LV14, 0 500,000. Lightning Release, LV14, 589 500,000. Water Release, LV13, 0 300,000. Earth Release, LV13, 0 300,000. Sealing Techniques, LV10, 0 30,000. Yang Release, LV12, 0 150,000. Yin Release, LV13, 0 300,000. Elemental Fusion, locked. Sharingan, 3 Tomo. Remaining ninja points, 100. Hayashi attempted to upgrade sealing techniques again. Insufficient ninja points. He tried once more. Insufficient ninja points. Silence followed. Over 1,000,000 points, gone in moments. The loss stung. He had planned to unlock elemental fusion and experiment with advanced combinations, perhaps even magnet release. Still, the surge of power flooding his body was undeniable. If he faced Orochimaru or Sakumo again, he would not be overwhelmed. A faint, dangerous smile curved across Uchiha Hayashi's face. Chapter 292, Frosted Morning. 1086 words. The next morning, at 6 o'clock, Hayashi woke up. He had planned to sleep a little longer, but for some reason, all drowsiness had vanished. He turned his head toward the window and noticed a thin layer of frost clinging to the glass. It was already November, and the weather had begun to turn cold. Frost was not unusual, yet yesterday the temperature had still hovered near 20 degrees. Overnight, it had dropped to 10. The sudden changes in Konoha's climate were enough to irritate anyone. As Nawaki once liked to say, this kind of weather was sick and needed treatment. Because the temperature had not declined steadily, traces of green still lingered throughout the village. Leaves fell, of course, but among the mix of brown and fading colors lining the roads, green always stood out first. Perhaps it was because green made people feel calmer. Green leaves, green grass, green hats. Wait. That last one was odd. Hayashi cleared his thoughts. Since sleep was no longer an option, he decided not to waste time. He rolled out of bed, planning to run a few laps around the village to readjust to his significantly increased strength. On the way back, he would buy breakfast for Mikoto and Kushina. After washing up, he took 2 steps forward, then paused and glanced toward the bookshelf. A crow lay curled up there, wrapped snugly in a cloak. Little Black had tucked itself inside, hunched into a round, brooding shape and sleeping soundly. The cloak had been sewn by Kushina using old clothes. It even came with a hood, decorated with a crooked drawing of a crow that somehow made the garment look even more ridiculous. Little Black, Hayashi said by the door, want to go for a walk? No response. Little Black, I'll take you out to get some exercise. Still nothing. Hayashi knew better. A crow with hearing that sharp could not possibly miss his voice. This time, the bird stirred. A black head poked out from the cloak, one eye squinting at him with clear disdain, as if saying, I am a crow, not a dog. Why would I go for a walk? 5 seconds later, it pulled its head back inside and resumed sleeping. Hayashi sighed. Left with no other choice, he stepped out alone and headed toward the street. The road was quiet, though vendors had already begun setting up their stalls. Life did not stop simply because ninjas existed. Ordinary civilians did not risk their lives on missions, but they still struggled to make ends meet. In that sense, no one lived easily. With that thought, Hayashi warmed up as he walked, then gradually picked up speed and began running through the village. Halfway through his run, he encountered might die. "Yo, Hayashi. Out running too?" "Yeah," Hayashi replied. "I've had too much free time lately. If I don't move, my body feels like it'll rust." Dai was, as always, dressed in his eye-catching green jumpsuit. Even though he had earned more money over the past 2 years, he showed no intention of changing his wardrobe. It was clear he genuinely loved it. Sure enough, Dai leaned closer and spoke enthusiastically. "I'm telling you, Hayashi, taijutsu just isn't complete without the proper outfit. How about I give you a set?" Hayashi shook his head immediately. No matter how confident he was, there were limits. Without thick eyebrows and that level of shamelessness, wearing something like that was simply impossible. They chatted for a while before parting ways. Dai also reminded Hayashi to visit the shop sometime to check the accounts from the past 2 years. It was unnecessary, of course. Hayashi did not lack money. He simply wanted to help Might Guy's father however he could. Dai deserved respect. By the way, Dai was now married. That alone eased a long-standing worry in Hayashi's mind. He had once feared that Dai might follow some extreme ideal of devotion and never settle down. Thankfully, that concern proved unfounded. After 8 o'clock, Hayashi ended his training. He returned home to shower, then went to the shopping street to buy breakfast before heading to Konoha Hospital. Beside Mikoto's bed sat a folding recliner for whoever stayed overnight. It was cramped but usable. Hayashi used to sleep there himself, but since the agreement had been signed, Kushina had taken over night duty. When Hayashi entered the ward with breakfast, both girls were already awake, lying on the bed and playing shogi. Judging by Kushina's restless scratching at her ears and cheeks, her loss was imminent. "Hayashi brought breakfast," Kushina declared shamelessly. "Game over, game over. This one doesn't count." She sprang off the bed and smoothly intercepted the food. Mikoto only smiled and calmly packed away the board. Hayashi stayed for a while, chatting casually. At 10 o'clock, he stood up and left. Soon, he arrived at the familiar small building. He knocked a few times. "The door's not locked." "Come in, kid," Tsunade replied almost instantly. Hayashi turned the handle and stepped inside. Honestly, no thief would dare come here. Even ignoring Tsunade's fearsome reputation, anyone trying to steal money would be better off gambling against her instead. The house looked exactly as expected. Unwashed lunchboxes, underwear casually tossed onto the sofa, and a floor layered with dust. A mix of strange odors lingered in the air, nearly forcing Hayashi back outside. Can people really live like this? After a moment's thought, he gave up on removing his shoes. The floor was unlikely to be cleaner than the soles anyway. He opened every window in the living room. Only then did the air improve slightly. Tsunade descended the stairs in her pajamas. She showed no concern for her disheveled appearance. In her eyes, Hayashi was still just a kid. After nudging aside the underwear she had tossed onto the sofa earlier, she dropped onto it and yawned. "What brings you here now?" she asked lazily. "Got time to spare?" The sarcasm was obvious. Preparations for the operation had been finished days ago. Hayashi smiled awkwardly. It was clear that Tsunade remained well informed about village affairs, even without leaving her home. Including matters involving the Acha. After some idle conversation, her gambling itch resurfaced. She dragged Hayashi into another card game. The deck he had left behind last time now looked noticeably worn. Apparently, she had been playing quite often. "I won't lose today," Tsunade said confidently. Hayashi only smiled faintly, saying nothing as he met her gaze. Chapter 293, A Price for Healing, Bonus. 1011 words. It turned out that Tsunade possessed a truly terrifying level of bad luck. Acha Hayashi's luck was not particularly good either, but at least it had never reached the absurd extreme of losing every single gambling round. One had to wonder how many wrongs a person must have committed in a previous life to suffer such retribution in this one. In less than half an hour, Tsunade's emotions had gone through a complete cycle. She began cheerful and confident, shifted into irritation midway through, and finally settled into a state of complete emotional numbness. Such dramatic fluctuations could only be found at a gambling table. And that was despite the fact that neither of them had even a shred of luck. "Kid, do you even understand the rules?" Tsunade snapped as she scattered the cards across the table. "Are you trying to beg me like this? You need to make me happy first before I treat anyone. Otherwise, I can't guarantee whether Mikoto will have after effects." Hayashi fell silent. "Fine, forget it," Tsunade said, waving her hand impatiently. The surgical equipment at the hospital is ready, right? Yes, Hayashi replied. Everything is prepared, just waiting for you. Good, Tsunade said, then raised her right hand and shaped her fingers together. From Hayashi's angle, it looked suspiciously like a heart. After thinking for 2 seconds, he said carefully, Sensei, there's no need for the gesture. I understand. You're wishing Mikoto a smooth recovery. Recovery my foot, Tsunade barked. I'm talking about money. The medical fee. Hayashi froze. I've already stepped down from the position of head of medical affairs, Tsunade continued. I'm a private practitioner now. Of course I charge. Even if I didn't, there should at least be a service fee. How much? Hayashi asked obediently. Tsunade tapped her chin. Not much. 300,000 ryo. That amount was roughly equivalent to the reward for an A-rank mission. In that case, Hayashi said after a brief pause, I'm a bit short on cash at the moment. Give me a few days and I'll pay you back double. Anything extra, consider it an investment. Tsunade accepted this without hesitation and took a sip of her now cold tea, clearly signaling that the matter was settled and he was free to leave. Hayashi hesitated, then spoke again. Tsunade-sensei, there's one more thing. She nodded for him to continue. The Hyuga clan head's eyesight is deteriorating. Himeji asked me to see if you could examine him. Tsunade did not respond immediately. She held her teacup and stared at Hayashi long enough for him to feel uncomfortable. Hyuga Himeji, she said at last. If I remember correctly, Elder Utatane Koharu assigned her to your squad. Yes, Hayashi replied. Is there an issue? That woman is always scheming, Tsunade muttered, then grew serious. Hayashi, I'll be honest. Hyuga head's condition is complicated. The third Hokage consulted me before, and my answer hasn't changed. She stood up and continued, setting aside clan relations, if a ninja is injured for the sake of the village, I will never ignore it. But eye injuries vary. If it were ordinary trauma, any competent medical ninja could treat it. His case involves a forbidden jutsu. The original Byakugan has been completely destroyed. What if a new pair of eyes is transplanted? Hayashi asked. Tsunade shook her head. That technique damages the surrounding neural tissue. You can't simply replace the eyes and fix the problem. Even for me, she added, the surgery carries extreme risk. There's a high chance of total blindness. I understand, Hayashi sighed, unsure how to relay this to Himeji. Explain the risks clearly, Tsunade said. Let them decide for themselves. If they accept it, bring them back. Understood. She paused, then added casually, your Acha clan also has a similar forbidden jutsu, don't they? When I was young, my grandfather mentioned a technique that could erase injuries as if they never existed. Like a dream. I don't know if it was real. Tsunade continued speaking, but Hayashi's pupils contracted sharply. That technique sounded exactly like Izanagi. He had already searched the scroll left behind by the mirror thoroughly, knowing how vital such a life-saving jutsu would be. Unfortunately, he had found nothing. Later, through indirect inquiries, he learned that the clan maintained a sealed archive similar to a forbidden scroll repository. The most dangerous and valuable techniques were deliberately preserved there. It was likely kept at clan head Uchiha Fugaku's residence. Not only Izanagi, but also Izanami, along with advanced fire release techniques used by legends like Uchiha Madara, remained completely inaccessible to him. It seemed he would eventually have to visit the clan head's home. Even if it meant stealing. Hey, Tsunade snapped, tapping the table. Are you even listening? Hayashi blinked. Sorry. I hate it when people zone out while others are talking. It's rude. Hayashi said nothing. Tsunade snorted and leaned back on the sofa, completely unconcerned with her exposed posture. Honestly, she said lazily, I dislike treating people like that the most. Half familiar, full of connections. Hard to charge, no profit. I prefer treating acquaintances like you, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru. If there's money, it's easy to squeeze out. Hayashi stared, stunned by her shameless honesty. She continued enthusiastically, then there are people I'm not close to at all, like your clan head. If Fugaku ever needs treatment, make sure you send him my way. She grinned. Big clients deserve special care. As she spoke, Tsunade grew more animated. Don't misunderstand, I'm not greedy. Money just keeps things clean between public and private. If Fugaku comes, I'd feel awkward not charging. We'll split it 70-30. The more Hayashi listened, the stranger it sounded. No matter how he calculated it, Tsunade seemed to be the one losing out. Which, somehow, made it even more suspicious. Underscore. Happy birthday to me, wilted flower. I hope you'll age gracefully. Here's a bonus chapter for you guys. Plus a discount code for my Patreon. Get 50% off. Use promo code HBD2ME. The discount ends in the next 2 days. Link, patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 294, Ambush Beyond the Border. 1192 words. While Tsunade was still calculating how to make money, deep within the forests of the Land of Fire, the Ucha clan ninja had already spent an entire day escorting the Sunagakure envoys. Calling it an escort was generous. In truth, it was surveillance, meant to ensure the Sand Ninja caused no trouble within Fire Country territory. Up to this point, the third Kazekage and Elder Chiyo were still being carried on the backs of 2 Ucha ninja. In that regard alone, the escort had strictly followed the third Hokage's instructions. Before crossing the border of the Land of Fire, the Kazekage and Chiyo were not to be returned. As seasoned ninja traveling without rest, they would reach the border in roughly 2 more hours. At the center of the formation, Ucha Fugaku was the most heavily protected. Every Ucha ninja adjusted their pace to match his, which was the primary reason for their slower speed. Watching the tightly guarded Fugaku, Mana showed clear disdain in his eyes. If not for the third Kazekage and Chiyo, he would have ordered his men to leave these escorts far behind long ago. So the Ucha clan did not only produce geniuses. Occasionally, they produced useless individuals as well. Despite his thoughts, Mana showed no outward hostility. They had already paid a great price to Konoha, and there was no reason to invite unnecessary trouble now. More importantly, he regarded himself as a ninja on the same level as the third Hokage. To argue with mere escorts would only diminish his own standing. Such behavior was beneath him. Thus, one group harboring hidden intentions and another filled with arrogance continued onward without incident. Time passed quickly. After 2 hours, they reached the border. One more step would place them within the Land of Rivers. Can you return our third Kazekage and Elder Chiyo now? Mana's voice was cold, as though the Konoha ninja before him were nothing more than insignificant weeds. The Ucha clan's arrogance was well known. They barely respected ninja from their own village, let alone those from a defeated nation. An Ucha ninja immediately stepped forward, clearly intending to mock him, but before he could speak, Ucha Fugaku raised a hand to stop him. Return the hostages. After halting the impulsive ninja, Fugaku let out a soft laugh and nodded toward his subordinates. Yes. Since the order came from the young clan head, the Ucha ninja complied without hesitation. Manus gave a low hum, his opinion of the young clan head improving slightly. He then gestured for his men to retrieve the unconscious Kazekage and Chiyo. Well then, Mana said calmly after confirming their safety, Konoha ninja, we will take our leave. He turned and began retreating toward the Land of Wind. The hidden sand village was currently leaderless and unstable. Not only did someone need to restore order, but someone would also have to answer to the daimyo. Both the Kazekage and Chiyo were necessary. However, after walking only a few hundred meters, Mana sensed something wrong. Chakra fluctuation stirred beneath the ground. So they really planned a sneak attack. As a near Kage-level ninja, Mana's reaction was immediate. Hand seals were completed in an instant. 3 consecutive earth release, earth wall techniques erupted from the ground, completely surrounding the sand ninja. At the same time, the terrain rose upward, isolating them. The once solid earth turned to mud. Moments later, countless explosive tags ignited, tearing through the area in a violent chain of detonations. So Konoha truly intended to attack. Standing among the Ucha ranks, Fugaku watched the explosions with suppressed exhilaration burning in his chest. He raised his hand sharply. Attack! 6 fire release, great dragon flame techniques, enhanced with wind release, roared forward through the smoke. Against such combined firepower, earth release defenses could not endure for long. However, those accompanying Manus were far from ordinary ninja. One sand ninja puppet opened its mouth, firing several specially reinforced steel wires. The wires gleamed coldly as they pierced through the flames. These wires would not melt under ordinary fire, though they could only redirect, not extinguish it. That was enough. Fire release, flame bullet. A massive burst of fire surged along the steel wires, splitting into 6 streams and colliding with the great dragon flames. Though weaker in raw power, the flame bullet gained a decisive advantage through guidance. The combined Ucha fire release was forcibly redirected, flowing away along the embedded wires. Lord Manus, one sand ninja asked while guarding the unconscious Kazekage and Chio, should we fire a signal flare? No, Manus replied calmly. Not yet. He had not entered the land of fire with only 4 subordinates by accident. As a defeated nation, their escort size was irrelevant. More importantly, the third Hokage was known for his credibility. They were delivering compensation, not plotting war. Manus had assumed their safety was assured. All additional sand forces were stationed within the land of rivers. This ambush was entirely unexpected. Yet once he calmed down, Manus sensed something else. Was this truly the third Hokage's order? Or was this the Ucha clan acting independently? The difference was crucial. If this was the Hokage command, retreat was the only option. But if it was not, then the Ucha clearly underestimated him. After careful thought, Manus dismissed the first possibility. The third Hokage would not resort to such tactics, nor would he deploy Ucha ninja. He would have sent his own disciples. This could only be an unauthorized Ucha action. Now it made sense. They waited until crossing the border so responsibility would be unclear. Manus made his decision. You 4, he ordered, take Elder Chio and the Kazekage and rendezvous with the main force. I will hold them here. Once you regroup, send reinforcements. I intend to wipe out these Konoha ninja. My lord, one subordinate hesitated, won't this violate the agreement? No, Manus replied firmly. This is not the third Hokage's order. I will draw them into the land of rivers. Outside fire country, there will be no consequences. Go. Yes. The sand ninja obeyed immediately. Watching them prepare to flee, the Ucha gathered around Fugaku. As the young clan head, what are your orders? Fugaku's gaze hardened. At the daimyo's residence, his childhood companion had died at the hands of sand ninja. It was there that his Tsutomu Sharingan first awakened. He would not let them leave unscathed. It seems Manus plans to stall us alone, Fugaku said. In that case, the entire team advances. Kill Manus. With one near Kage-level ninja, for elite Jonin, and the rest seasoned Jonin and special Jonin, victory was assured if they coordinated properly. This would be payment for the dead. Young clan head, an elite Jonin warned, the clan chief ordered us not to pursue beyond the land of fire. My father also said to judge based on the situation, Fugaku replied sharply. Now Manus stands alone. Are you afraid? Silence followed. I will take responsibility. We will not pursue deeply. Understood. Seeing no further objections, Fugaku raised his hand. Full advance. Once this is done, we return to the village. Chapter 295, The Land of Rivers. 805 words. Facing the assault of more than a dozen Ucha ninja, Manus showed not the slightest trace of panic. Instead, he raised a hand and made a rude gesture toward them before turning around and fleeing outright. For a brief moment, the battlefield fell silent. He had looked completely resolute just seconds earlier, as if prepared to fight alone against many. And yet, he ran. So even someone like him understood the art of fighting while retreating. Seeing this, even the tense Ucha Fugaku let out a cold laugh and immediately urged his clan members forward. They chased for several hundred meters before Manus suddenly glanced back. In the same motion, he intercepted the fists and kicks of 2 Jonin closing in from behind, sweeping one aside with a powerful roundhouse kick. The instant an opening appeared, he burst forward directly toward Fugaku. Kunai filled the air like a dense iron net. Wind release, great weasel sickle. A violent gale surged forth, blades of wind colliding with the incoming weapons. The first wave of kunai shattered, but more followed relentlessly. As the wind blades weakened, the remaining kunai continued their descent with unabated force. With no other choice, Manus vanished using the body flicker technique. Let's see how long you can keep this up, Fugaku snorted. Manus did not respond. He bit his thumb and rapidly formed hand seals. Summoning jutsu. The smoke dispersed, revealing a massive iron war fan standing upright before him. The shinobi world was home to many legendary weapons, the 7 ninja swords of the mist and the 3rd Hokage's adamantine staff among them. Manus' reputation was built upon this fan. The moment his hand closed around its handle, his presence surged violently. He lunged forward, his figure blurring as he appeared above an Ucha ninja. The fan came crashing down like an iron ruler. A sharp crack echoed. The Ucha raised a kunai to block, but it snapped instantly. The fan struck cleanly, sending the ninja flying. Whether he lived or died was impossible to tell. In the very next moment, Manus snapped the fan open behind him, intercepting a great fireball hurtling toward his back. Without pausing, he leapt skyward just as 4 earthen pillars erupted from the ground beneath him like spears. Twisting midair, Manus avoided the lower spikes and swept his fan horizontally. The pillars were severed cleanly, collapsing into rubble. Even if he had underestimated them earlier, he now had to admit it. These Ucha fought with frightening coordination, moving as if they had drilled together countless times. Still, Manus had no intention of defeating them head-on. His goal was simple. Delay them. That's it, he muttered, retreating steadily. Follow me. Straight toward the land of rivers. As he fought and withdrew, he gradually pulled the Ucha farther from the border. Fugaku never noticed. Though several clan members had fallen, he was convinced Manus was nearing his limit. Just a little more pressure, and he would break. Very well. Listen, Fugaku called out sharply. Whoever captures this Tsunagakure commander will be rewarded by me once we return to the clan. His voice hardened. I will personally petition the current clan head to grant you 1 reading of the Ucha secret scroll. The battlefield froze. The Ucha secret scroll. Every clansman knew of it, yet only the clan head's direct bloodline was permitted to read it. Legends claimed it recorded the deepest mysteries of the Sharingan, along with powerful jutsu and even forbidden techniques. The pride of the Ucha must not be stained. The ninja exchanged glances. In each other's eyes burned the same fierce desire. No matter how powerful Manus was, he was already past 60, far beyond a shinobi's prime. How long could an old man like that hold out? For those who had remained behind during the war, earning merit was already difficult. Access to the clan's secret scroll was a temptation no one could resist. In an instant, the Ucha surged forward once more. They never noticed the Sand Ninja squad sweeping in from far to their flank. Young clan head, the Sensor Ninja shouted in panic, behind us. Massive chakra signatures. What? Fugaku snapped. From the land of fire. Yes, and closing fast. Leaf reinforcements. Fugaku muttered in confusion. But the answer became clear almost immediately. The leading figures wore Tsunagakure uniforms. The Sand forces had split the moment orders were issued. One unit had deliberately looped wide, avoiding sensor range, to cut off the Ucha from behind. As Fugaku took in the advancing Sand Ninja, despair washed over him. Was this the end? He clenched his fists. Underscore. Get 50% off. Use promo code HBD2ME. The discount ends in the next tomorrow. Benefits include advanced chapters ranging from 40, 70 and even 100 chapters ahead, depending on tier subscribed to. Link, patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 296, The Price of Impulsiveness. 1,114 words. Unsurprisingly, the numerous Sand Ninja formed a tight encirclement around the Ucha clan, clearly intending to annihilate them in a single sweep. The disparity in strength was overwhelming. Although every Ucha present was at least Jonin level and individually formidable, facing a sustained human wave assault meant their chakra reserves would inevitably be drained. This confrontation held no suspense. Under normal circumstances, the correct choice would have been to break through immediately and retreat back into the land of fire. Given the political situation, Manus could not openly dispatch troops across the border without risking the outbreak of another war. That responsibility was not something he could bear. However, the reality was grim. All escape routes had already been severed, and they were deep within the land of rivers. Reinforcements were impossible. With no alternatives left, Ucha Fugaku could only lead the remaining clansmen while fighting and retreating, desperately searching for a weakness in the encirclement. But as the Sand Ninja continued to converge, the net tightened further. By the time they found temporary shelter, the original group of 20 had been reduced to 12. Inside a concealed cave in the land of rivers, Fugaku finally broke the silence. Can we still break out? He asked quietly, his gaze sweeping over the exhausted faces around him. No one answered. Once an encirclement reached this stage, escaping was extraordinarily difficult. When the strength gap was this severe, the struggle of the trapped was little more than a delay before death. Seeing the silence, Fugaku felt a wave of crushing self-blame. If not for his stubborn insistence, they would never have fallen into this situation. His clansmen would not be standing in a place like this, waiting for their end. Why had it come to this? He did not know. But suddenly, a figure surfaced in his thoughts. Hayashi. In the past, when facing him, Fugaku had followed his father's instructions and shown outward respect, yet inwardly he had always resisted. How could he not? He was only 17. Ambition and impatience were natural at that age. After years of hearing comparisons to others, he had developed an unspoken defiance. Sometimes, Fugaku even believed that if their roles were reversed, he might not perform any worse than Hayashi. He simply had not been given the opportunity. His experiences at the daimyo's residence had made him steadier and more cautious, but they had not quieted his unwillingness to remain ordinary. Instead, they had sharpened it. He believed firmly that, given the chance, he could accomplish something extraordinary. That belief was exactly why he had volunteered for this mission. If Hayashi were here, Fugaku wondered, what choice would he make? The answer came instinctively. Hayashi would not hesitate. He would choose to sacrifice himself without a second thought. As that realization settled, Fugaku's wavering finally ceased. At that moment, Uchiha Hikari, the strongest among them, stood and spoke calmly. We will concentrate our strength on one point. No matter the cost, we must ensure the young clan head escapes. The others either frowned or silently shook their heads, but none voiced opposition. What alternative did they have? If they abandoned Fugaku and fled together, even surviving would not spare them from punishment upon returning to the clan. Fugaku straightened and stepped forward. He bowed deeply to everyone present. Please listen to me, he said solemnly. This situation exists solely because of my impulsiveness as young clan head. I am still alive only because you protected me again and again. But I will not allow you to continue throwing away your lives for my sake. He lifted his head, his eyes steady. From this moment on, everyone disperse and break out individually. Do not worry about me. Young clan head. Fugaku raised his hand, stopping them. I have thought this through. There is no need to persuade me. He turned to Uchiha Hikari and bowed once more. Uncle Hikari. If I survive, then nothing more needs to be said. If I die, please tell my father that this was my decision alone. It has nothing to do with anyone else. He must not blame you. Uchiha Hikari stared at him for a long moment before nodding heavily. I understand. The others remained silent, yet inwardly, many felt a sense of release. The Sand Ninja were numerous, but their strength varied. Once the Uchiha scattered, the enemy would be forced to divide as well, greatly reducing the pressure on each individual. At the very least, they would no longer face coordinated attacks from dozens at once. As long as they focused on escape and avoided powerful opponents, survival was possible. The cost, however, was clear. Uchiha Fugaku would almost certainly die. That was why no one had proposed this plan earlier. Manus' true target had always been the young clan head. As Sand Ninja silhouettes appeared in the distance, Fugaku gave his final command. Prepare to break out. Disperse. He moved deeper into the land of rivers while the others chose separate directions and vanished into the forest. Not long after, a Sensor Ninja knelt before Manus. Lord Manus, the enemy has split up. That choice surprises me, Manus replied with a faint smile. Assign a small unit to pursue each one. If the opponent is too strong, disengage. Do not cross into the land of fire. He paused briefly. The rest of you, come with me. We capture the Uchiha young clan head alive. Yes, sir. 5 minutes later, Fugaku found himself completely surrounded. He scanned the Sand Ninja closing in, his expression turning grim as he tightened his grip on his kunai. A wind release attack came screaming toward him. He dodged, then flashed forward in a burst of speed, finally killing the ninja who had harassed him relentlessly. But victory brought no relief. Before dying, the enemy had carved a vicious wound into his leg. Now, Fugaku bore 2 deep injuries, one across his back and another in his thigh. Blood dripped steadily onto the ground, each step sending sharp pain through his body. Worse still, he had almost no chakra left. He had deliberately avoided using ninjutsu to conserve energy, yet even so, his reserves were nearly exhausted. Unwillingness flooded his chest. He was only 17. He had not married, had no children, and had not led the Uchiha to greatness. Fear pierced him, raw and overwhelming. Then, without warning, that fear twisted into something else. Rage. It surged violently from his heart, uncontrollable. A sharp pain stabbed into his eyes. The Sharingan, which had been dormant, snapped open and began to spin violently. When Fugaku looked again, the familiar two Tomo had transformed. They had become 3. Chapter 297, 297, Izangi. 980 words. Ah ha ha ha, I knew I was not meant to die. Fugaku swung his kunai wildly, laughter spilling from his throat like madness. For a brief moment, no one dared to rush forward. Standing amid the sand ninja formation, Manus watched Fugaku with undisguised interest. He had crossed blades with the Ucha many times. Sudden evolutions on the battlefield were not unfamiliar to him, yet witnessing one firsthand still felt uncanny every single time. What a pity that non-Ucha shinobi could not wield the Sharingan. Otherwise, the number of people hunting it would far exceed those seeking the Byakugan. That alone was why the Ucha had never needed something like the caged bird seal. Feeling chakra flow back into his body and the power of his eyes surge, Fugaku had never felt better. Confidence flooded him. With a hoarse shout, he charged back into the fray, engaging several sand ninja at once. Blades clashed violently. One by one, sand bodies collapsed to the ground. At the same time, new wounds continued to open across Fugaku's body. Oh? Faster reflexes. As expected of a three-tomo Sharingan, Manus murmured, his eyes glinting with naked greed. Still, that was all. He had no intention of gouging out his own eyes for it. That kind of act would only cripple him. The exhilaration in Fugaku's chest did not last long. Reality came crashing down. He still could not break through. Worse, every movement tore at his injuries. Blood soaked his clothes as his steps grew unsteady, his body swaying on the verge of collapse. The chakra he had just regained was already close to exhaustion. How laughable. Before he could even escape, his legs would fail him again. Noticing Fugaku's slowing pace, Manus spoke calmly, his voice cold. Finish him quickly. Yes, sir. The instant the order was given, a sand ninja flashed behind Fugaku, a long blade already raised. Clang! Fugaku blocked with his kunai, but the impact sent him sliding backward across the ground. Before he could recover, a flurry of pale blades descended upon him. Steel struck from every direction. With the kinetic vision of the three-tomo Sharingan, Fugaku barely managed to deflect each strike. That was his limit. The sand ninja sneered, surged forward, and leapt, swinging straight for Fugaku's throat. Fugaku snapped out another kunai, hooking the greatsword at its ring pommel. The stalemate lasted only an instant. The blade suddenly crackled with lightning. Lightning release vibrated along its edge, slicing cleanly through the kunai. Instinct took over. Fugaku twisted aside, but searing electricity still carved a blackened gash across his cheek. The sand ninja followed up without hesitation, driving a brutal kick into Fugaku's thigh. Crack! The bone snapped with a sickening sound. Unaccustomed to such pain, Fugaku tried to scream, but no sound came out. His body flew backward like a severed kite, smashing into a boulder before rolling helplessly down the slope. He lay sprawled on the ground like a discarded corpse, breathing faintly, utterly devoid of strength. Am I going to die? Despair crept over him. No matter how he struggled. No matter how he roared inside his own mind. His body would not respond. Footsteps approached, each one tolling like a death knell. No, there has to be something I forgot. He refused to give up. He had just awakened the three-tomo Sharingan. To die here would mean everything was meaningless. A faint voice echoed in his mind, stubbornly keeping hope alive. What was it? A hazy will whispered to him. Grasp those few words buried in your memory, and you will survive this nightmare. But the agony in his shattered leg scattered his thoughts. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he saw his father, his clansmen, standing far away in the village. Would any of them make it back alive? Then, suddenly, he remembered. The secret Ucha scroll. At death's edge, Fugaku raised a trembling hand and forced the last remnants of his chakra through 3 hand seals. Boar. Hare. Sheep. A blinding pain tore through his left eye as the forbidden technique activated. Izanagi. Dead? Manus asked calmly. Yes, Lord Manus. Good. Manus glanced at Fugaku's face and scoffed. Dying with such a blissful smile. I wonder what he saw. What should we do with the body, sir? Leave it, Manus replied. Those fleeing Ucha will come back for him. Let them deliver the corpse to Uchiyama themselves. He laughed softly. With that, Manus ordered his unit to withdraw toward the land of wind. Once they departed, silence returned to the land of rivers. The cold November wind whispered through the dry shrubs. After an unknowable span of time, the corpse of Ucha Fugaku suddenly opened its eyes. The once crimson three-tomo Sharingan in his left eye had withered into a dull grey. Groaning, then laughing hoarsely, he croaked, "Ha ha! I'm alive." The movement tore at his scorched cheek, and he hissed in pain. "Isn't Izanagi supposed to turn everything into an illusion, even death?" he muttered bitterly. "Why am I not healed? In his current condition, he would die here long before any clansman found him. Am I really going to be the first Uchi to die after using Izanagi?" Fear clenched his heart. Just then, a white spore swelled from the ground and attached itself to his numb, broken leg. With a limb shattered and unresponsive, he felt nothing. He did not know how long he lay there. Eventually, sensation slowly returned. His chakra stirred faintly, and the pain in his wounds dulled. Gritting his teeth, Fugaku forced himself upright. Dragging his ruined leg behind him, he limped, step by step, toward the land of fire. ______. Get 50% off. Use promo code HBD2ME. The discount ends today. Benefits include advanced chapters ranging from 40, 70, and even 100 chapters ahead, depending on tier subscribed to. Link, patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 298, 298 I'm Madara Ucha. 1145 words. Deep within an unknown underground domain, massive tree roots stretched in chaotic patterns, gripping dry earthen walls like living veins. Darkness and silence pressed together in this place, heavy and oppressive. At the heart of the cavern stood a gigantic humanoid stone statue. Its surface resembled decayed wood, its form grotesque and twisted. 9 eyes remained tightly shut upon its face, radiating an unsettling presence. Below the statue, thick pipes extended outward and connected directly into the body of a white-haired old man. He sat upon a stone platform, leaning lightly on a cane. His expression was calm, almost indifferent. Beneath his unkempt bangs, 2 hollow eye sockets stared into nothingness, lending him an air of quiet terror. The old man gazed into the darkness ahead. Or rather, he gazed into nothing at all. Yet that hardly mattered. As long as he wished it, nothing within the ninja world could escape his perception. Suddenly, the dark ground rippled, as though stirred by an unseen force. The soil twisted and parted, and a pure white humanoid figure slowly emerged. "Oh," the white creature exclaimed in an exaggerated tone. "Lord Madara, you woke up quite early this time." The performance was obvious. Madara raised his head slightly. "How long have I been asleep?" "Well." The white creature tilted its head and pretended to think. 7,777 days. It has already been 20 years. A rare ripple of emotion surfaced in Madara's voice. Anyone hearing such a number would find it unsettling. "Wrong, wrong," the creature hurriedly waved its hands. "That is the time since I last relieved myself." Silence filled the cavern. "Let me count properly," it added quickly. "I cover Notch every day." "Please wait." Madara gave a cold snort but said nothing. For him, time was the least valuable thing he possessed. And this white zetsu, a byproduct of Hashirama's cells, served well enough as a distraction during endless nights. 5 minutes later, white zetsu straightened up, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Lord Madara, I am done counting. It has been 186 days. Half a year, then." Madara nodded slowly. "Has anything of note occurred?" "Yes," white zetsu replied at once. The third Kazekage was captured by Orochimaru, Sakumo Hatake, Jiraiya, and Hayoshi. Tsunagakure surrendered shortly after, and the treaty has already been signed. Tsunagakure's defeat was inevitable. Madara nodded in understanding, then shook his head in disdain. This third Kazekage was utterly useless. Each generation grows weaker than the last. Back when Hashirama and I fought for 3 days and 3 nights, muscle against muscle and soul against soul. "Yes, I know," white zetsu interrupted smoothly. "You have told me many times." Madara fell silent. For some reason, the underground chamber felt unusually stifling. "What of the hidden cloud and Iwagakure?" he asked. "They are still fighting," white zetsu answered promptly. "That brat Onoki has not grown at all." White zetsu tilted its head in confusion. "Then why did you help him, Lord Madara? If you had not released the 8 tails, perhaps the war would have ended long ago." "I was not helping Onoki," Madara replied calmly. "I was helping humanity." Long ago, he had learned the truth recorded upon the stone tablet. In ancient times, chakra did not exist. Humans lived like any other creature upon this land. Then the Sage of Six Paths appeared and spread this unseen power across the world, granting humanity extraordinary abilities. Under his guidance, those who wielded chakra were like gods upon the earth, building temples and spreading wisdom and harmony. For a brief era, humanity transcended itself and achieved something resembling peace. But humans possessed physical bodies and weak hearts, easily corrupted by pride, hatred, impatience, and greed. Over time, the teachings of the sage were twisted. Chakra became a tool for desire. War was born. Stronger wars. Faster wars. More devastating wars. Humanity fell. And darkness ruled for 1,000 years. In Madara's eyes, the Ninja World War represented the peak of that darkness. If humanity wished to embrace the light, it first had to endure the abyss. The deeper the pain, the more desperately the light would be sought. And I, Ucha Madara. A faint flush crept onto his withered face. I will become the one who lights that path. After a long silence, White Zetsu hesitated before speaking again. Lord Madara, did you fall asleep? No. Speak. The one you asked me to monitor, Ucha Fugaku. Something happened today. White Zetsu then recounted everything it had witnessed, Fugaku's battle, his desperation, and the moment he returned from death. It was Izanagi, Madara said, touching his empty eye sockets. A technique that turns reality into illusion. All injuries, even death, are rewritten as dreams. The price is the permanent loss of sight. Then why did his wounds remain? White Zetsu asked. Otherwise, I would not have needed to give him chakra. He activated the technique only after collapsing, Madara replied. The Sharingan recorded his state at that moment. Naturally, the injuries were preserved. I see. White Zetsu nodded in satisfaction. Should I continue monitoring him? For now, yes. Losing one eye meant nothing. If Madara wished it, even a piece of scrap could be forged into a weapon. Strength was not the key. Love was. Only love could deepen despair, and only despair could give birth to hatred powerful enough to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan. Fugaku possessed love. Otherwise, he would not have chosen to sacrifice himself for his clansmen. Yet Madara remained dissatisfied. The boy wished to act, yet lacked decisiveness. His resolve wavered. In that battle, Fugaku should have dispersed immediately upon sensing the trap, before the encirclement was complete. Instead, he hesitated. That was why Madara chose to observe rather than commit. He had time. What of Nagato? Madara asked. He still lives in that small wooden hut with Yahiko and Konan. He trains, and sometimes helps nearby towns. I see. He still needs time. And the Sharingan? I have gathered many. They rest beside the Jido statue. Shall I install them now? I will handle it myself. Return to your surveillance. Understood. White Zetsu sank into the ground like melting wax and vanished without a trace. Alone once more, Madara rose slowly and walked toward the Jido statue without leaning on his cane. When his hand touched its surface, it trembled slightly, intoxication flickering across his face. Soon, he whispered. My successor will return them all to you. At that time. He spread his arms. I will be resurrected. I will return to this world. I will become the new Sage of Six Paths. There is only one path to peace. And Hashirama. A thin smile formed. He too will live forever within my infinite Tsukuyomi. Madara lifted his head toward the endless darkness. I have waited for this for countless years. Chapter 299, Recovery. 1,292 words. As November reached its midpoint, Konoha entered a period of rapid recovery. This was where the village's foundation truly revealed its strength. Blessed with fertile land, convenient transportation routes, and a mild climate, Konoha seemed to recover at an astonishing pace, as if it had activated some hidden advantage. Mission requests poured into the Hokage building in endless streams, stacking up faster than they could be processed. The third Hokage aged face creased into a constant smile, blooming like a chrysanthemum. When no one else was around, he even found himself humming a tune, one said to have been composed by a genin named Kurosuchi. The spring breeze of reform blows across the land, Konoha's people are truly striving. Yet even as he hummed, the Hokage could not help but sigh. Too many missions were not necessarily a good thing. Every shinobi the village could spare had already been dispatched, yet the pile of unclaimed missions on his desk continued to grow. If not for concerns about long-term development, he would have already implemented emergency measures and allowed academy students to graduate early. Still, this was a fortunate problem to have. The other Kage would have killed to face such troubles. Especially Onoki. The third Tsukikage was reportedly so anxious that he had thrown out his back, wishing he could personally send 10,000 Iwa ninja to hang the third Reikage and vent his anger for 3 days and 3 nights. Previously, due to old psychological scars, Onoki always found Konoha unbearable to look at. Now, compared to the Cloud Village, he oddly felt that Konoha looked rather pleasing. That alone spoke volumes about how deeply he resented Kumogakure. However, whether it was resentment or satisfaction had nothing to do with Hayashi. At the moment, he stood quietly in the corridor of Konoha Hospital, waiting for news from the operating room. He corrected himself inwardly. Not the delivery room. The operating room. Still, the surgery was taking far too long. Even childbirth should have ended by now. Hayashi had been waiting since 9 in the morning. During that time, he had only left once, heading to the hospital cafeteria at noon to buy lunch. He had even brought back a portion for Tsunade, just in case she emerged hungry. It was not until nearly 4 in the afternoon that the light above the operating room door finally switched from red to green. Hayashi immediately stepped forward. The door opened, and Tsunade walked out. For a brief, absurd moment, his mind imagined her shaking her head solemnly and saying they had done all they could. He quickly dismissed the thought. Wrong scene. The real Tsunade walked out calmly, stretched lazily, her figure swaying slightly, and said in an even tone, "The surgery was a success." "Thank you, Tsunade-sensei," Hayashi said sincerely. "It's nothing," she replied loudly. "I already accepted your 300,000 ryo, so you are the client, right?" Her voice carried through the corridor, as if she wanted everyone to hear it. It did not matter. Though Tsunade was greedy and shameless at times, her medical skill was beyond question. Compared to her disheveled appearance a few days ago, she now looked radiant, like a completely different person. No wonder even someone like Shikaku had once harbored feelings for her. "Kid, what kind of look is that?" Tsunade narrowed her eyes. "Nothing," Hayashi replied, shaking his head. "It's just like seeing a friend who usually looks rough, only to realize that once they clean up, they are stunning." "Exciting my foot," Tsunade snorted. "If you keep reading those perverted novels," Jiraiya writes, "do not ever step into my house again." Silence followed. As the two spoke, the hospital corridor gradually became lively. Patients stepped out of their rooms, eager to catch a glimpse of the medical legend. Every few minutes, another ninja approached to greet Tsunade. Most of the people staying in Konoha Hospital had fought on the battlefield, and among them, very few had not been treated by her. In comparison, Hayashi's presence faded into the background. Does my brother Hayashi not deserve respect anymore? After a while, Tsunade, clearly losing patience, finished greeting another ninja and turned to him. "I am going back to rest. I have surgery on the Hyuga clan head tomorrow." "Yes. Thank you for your hard work." Hyuga Hayashi had finally decided to undergo surgery. As for where the replacement Byakugan came from, Hayashi did not know. "It really is tiring," Tsunade muttered. "Maybe I should find a disciple to take over." Hayashi's eyes lit up. "Speaking of disciples?" Before he could finish, Tsunade cut him off. "Do not recommend anyone. I know exactly who you want to talk about." She waved her hand dismissively. "I was only speaking casually. I will be leaving the village after the Chunin exams. I do not have time to train anyone." After taking 2 steps, she paused and tilted her head. "By the way, you are already the 3rd person to recommend her. Are you all doing this on purpose?" With that, she huffed and strode away. Hayashi stood there, bewildered. How did she know? What if he had only been about to talk about disciples and then wandered off into something completely unrelated? Truly rude. After grumbling internally for a while, he sighed. He had indeed intended to recommend someone. No. She was known in later years as the Walking Witch and had even become head of the medical department. Her talent was unquestionable, and she could eventually fill the gap Tsunade would leave behind. Judging by Tsunade's words, at least 2 others had already made the same suggestion. One of them was certainly Kushina. She and Nono had been inseparable for the past 2 years, close enough that they might as well have been sisters. Hayashi had mentioned it casually before, and Kushina likely took it seriously. Then who was the other? With that thought lingering, Hayashi entered the ward. Because her right hand had just undergone surgery and the anesthetic had not worn off, Mikoto was still unconscious. According to the medical ninja, she would need about 4 more hours to fully wake. Before leaving, Tsunade had already instructed the nurse to prepare medicinal herbs for decoction. Once Mikoto awoke, follow-up treatment would continue. Time passed quickly. The nurse came twice. Once to check on Mikoto, and once to deliver the prepared medicine. It was nearly 8 in the evening when Mikoto finally stirred. "You're awake." Hayashi stood from the chair, raised the head of the bed slightly, and picked up the bowl from the bedside table. "Tsunade-sensei said you should drink this as soon as you wake up." Mikoto's right hand was wrapped in bandages and unable to move, so she allowed him to feed her spoon by spoon. "The surgery went very well," Hayashi continued. "You should be able to leave the hospital in a couple of days, so do not rush." Kushina, Nawaki, and the others came by several times. "I sent them back. They will come again tomorrow." Mikoto looked at him and nodded gently. "Finish this first," he said softly. "I asked the nurse to prepare a late-night meal. Eat it before sleeping. I will stay here tonight." Half asleep, Mikoto responded quietly. ___________________________________ I have nothing to offer you except quality fan fictions. What you can offer me are power stones, which will help these stories reach more people. So stop being stingy smirking face and send them. Multiple chapters are already available on my Patreon. You can check it out if you want to read ahead. There are 100+ chapters on each work, with 2 daily chapters. White right pointing backhand index patreon.com/zphyr. I just hope at least one person checks it out, smiling face with open mouth and cold sweat. Chapter 300, Back to the Training Grounds. 971 words. Freedom from illness and disaster was the greatest happiness. After spending so many days in the hospital, Mikoto could not agree more. 3 days later, she eagerly removed her bandages, packed her belongings, and returned to the small house she had missed deeply. Everything inside was just as neat as when she had left. Someone had clearly been cleaning it every day. As Mikoto brushed her fingers across the newly repaired furniture, a warm smile appeared on her face. The next morning, she woke up early and headed straight for the training grounds. According to the Konoha Ninja Manual, every squad was required to complete a minimum number of missions each month. However, due to Mikoto's injury, Hayashi had directly waived the team's November quota. Now that she had fully recovered, Hayashi, her Jonin instructor, naturally called the team together again. In reality, calling the team together only meant Mikoto and Kushina. As for Minato and Nawaki, one had been taken by Jiraiya to Mount Myaboku to undergo strange and mysterious training, while the other had been dragged away by Tsunade for special instruction. With 2 of the legendary Sannin involved, Hayashi was more than happy to enjoy some rare peace. The trade-off was that he had to temporarily keep an eye on Kushina for Tsunade. Not that Tsunade had ever truly looked after her properly in the first place. Thinking about it, Hayashi found the situation somewhat pitiful. His Team 1 had rarely completed missions together and was almost always missing members. It felt like being a frontline fighter who had somehow been forced into a support role, with no place to complain. Watching the 2 girls whispering to each other nearby, Hayashi let out a quiet sigh. "What are you 2 chatting about?" "That's girl talk, none of your business," Kushina replied, sticking out her tongue playfully. "I'm your Jonin leader now," Hayashi said, putting on a serious expression. "Without my signature, your Chunin application is going nowhere." "You wouldn't dare," Kushina shot back confidently. "Careful, or Mikoto and I will beat you up." That familiar fiery attitude was unmistakable. After pretending to be ladylike for a while, the blood-red hot-blooded Kushina had finally returned. After a bit more banter, Hayashi cleared his throat and got to the point. "Starting next month, the squad will resume missions. For now, we'll focus on training the 2 of you." "Really?" Kushina's eyes lit up immediately. After 3 years stuck in the village without proper guidance or supervision, her skills had dulled more than she cared to admit. Training again was exactly what she wanted. Mikoto was quieter but no less eager. After being confined to bed for so long, she was itching to move freely again. At a Konoha training ground not far away. Lightning release, lightning strike. Lightning burst from Mikoto's hands, racing across the ground before slamming into a wooden post. In the blink of an eye, the post shattered into pieces. "How's your right arm?" Hayashi asked from the edge of the field. "Perfect," Mikoto replied excitedly. "No chakra disruption, and no pain at all." As expected, Hayashi said calmly. "Tsunade-sensei's personality may be questionable, but her medical ninjutsu is beyond reproach. He then added, from now on, limit your use of Kaidori to no more than 4 times a day. Understood. After a brief pause, Hayashi reconsidered. Actually, if your chakra reserves allow it, you can practice a bit more. Mikoto tilted her head slightly, signaling for him to continue. Hayashi stepped into the center of the field and raised both arms. Ox, hare, monkey. Lightning chakra gathered rapidly in his right hand, producing the familiar chirping sound of Kaidori. Then, without stopping, he placed his left hand against his right, drawing the lightning over until both hands crackled with the same sharp sound. When he separated them, each hand held a fully formed technique. Kaidori, twin piercing light. After watching the demonstration, Mikoto could not help asking, why haven't I seen that technique before? I developed it after your arm injury, Hayashi replied with a grin. There's also Rasengan, twin barrage. Pretty good names, right? Mikoto fell silent. But I can barely handle one Kaidori, she said honestly. I'm not asking you to use 2 at once, Hayashi explained. Just remember that you don't have to rely solely on your right hand. Your left hand can perform techniques too. I see, Mikoto said, nodding thoughtfully. It sounded simple, but in practice, it was anything but. Switching dominant hands felt unnatural, like trying to write or eat with the wrong hand. Still, mastering this would reduce strain on her chakra pathways and greatly improve her overall combat ability, especially her chakra control. After finishing Mikoto's training, Hayashi led Kushina to the opposite side of the training ground. They kept their distance, as advanced ninjutsu practice tended to be loud. Even techniques like the Rasengan caused noticeable disturbances. Standing beside him, Kushina looked eager. Rasengan again. Hayashi shook his head. Before that, I need to ask you something. What is it? Did you recommend Yakushi no to Tsunade-sensei? Kushina nodded without hesitation. You said she was talented in medical ninjutsu, so I mentioned her to Sister Tsunade. Did anyone else recommend her? I don't know, Kushina said quickly, waving her hands. Hayashi narrowed his eyes. Your face is red. You're lying. Kushina covered her mouth and mumbled, I promise not to tell. Then I'll guess, Hayashi said. You just nod or shake your head. You won't say anything, so it won't break your promise. After a brief hesitation, she agreed. Keeping secrets like this felt unbearable to her. Was it Nawaki? Kushina stayed silent. Seeing her reaction, Hayashi understood immediately. So it really was Nawaki. Who would have thought? The earnest, bushy-browed Nawaki, abandoning the single-life mindset? Unforgivable. Chapter 301, 301, The Limits of Unspoken Feelings. 1,418 words. Unrequited love was often described as something beautiful, but that beauty only existed within certain limits. Once those limits were crossed, unrequited love stopped being poetic and turned into something pitiful and self-degrading. Jiraiya from the manga was a prime example. His youthful and innocent crush had steadily evolved from mild admiration into an obsession, climbing from harmless longing all the way to the highest level of self-inflicted suffering, until in the end, he gained nothing at all. Of course, this was not meant to hint at Nawaki's future. After all, Hayashi was still waiting for him to someday give birth to a proper daughter-in-law for the family. Still, something felt off. Someone had once sworn to the heavens that he would only pursue a mature woman, and those words were still echoing clearly. How could he change his mind so suddenly? It was not that Nonu was unattractive, but due to years of displacement during her childhood, her growth had been delayed. At 12 years old, she looked more like an 8 or 9-year-old, much shorter than others her age. No matter how one looked at it, this did not fit the definition of a mature woman. So when Hayashi casually asked about it, Kushina's blazing gossip instincts immediately flared up. Any promise she had made to Nawaki was instantly forgotten as she spilled everything without restraint. According to Kushina, Nonu came to play with her almost every day. Nawaki, who lived near the village gate, often went out to open the door for her. Over time, feelings naturally developed. Whether it was affection born from familiarity or attraction at first sight was not worth discussing for now. Later, after hearing that Kushina had recommended a disciple to Tsunade, Nawaki rushed off to find his sister, hoping to use the connection to gain Nonu's favor. Unfortunately, his timing could not have been worse. Tsunade not only rejected him outright, she also seized the opportunity to drag him into special training. It was, by all accounts, a tragic love story. Kushina, however, showed no concern for Nawaki's survival. Her attention was entirely focused on her close friend. Hayashi, what about Nono? She asked. Didn't she already graduate? Hayashi replied. What, is she unhappy with her current team? Kushina shook her head. That's not it. She only graduated half a year ago, and right now she's just doing low-level missions in Konoha. There's nothing to be happy or unhappy about. It's just that you said she has talent in medical ninjutsu, but her jonin teacher doesn't know medical ninjutsu at all. Hayashi rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That is a problem. I haven't even heard of her current teacher, which probably means he's not very outstanding. To be honest, this situation was fairly normal. Nonu was an orphan who grew up outside the village. Although she entered Konoha with assistance, that support ended there. She had not displayed exceptional talent early on, and she was older than most new graduates. Hayashi and his peers had already graduated, gone on missions, and even seen the battlefield, while Nonu had only recently completed accelerated training. There were many jonin in Konoha, but even more genin graduating every year. Naturally, priority went to the village's own children. If it were not for Kushina's troublesome reputation and personal connections, the third Hokage might have directly placed Nonu into a generic Chunin-led team. This was also Tsunade's perspective. Being busy was part of it, but more importantly, she did not want to casually take in a student to teach medical ninjutsu without proper commitment. In the ninja world, talent mattered, but teachers mattered just as much. Hayashi did not know how Nonu had risen in her previous life, but root had likely played a major role. Now, with circumstances changed, it was entirely possible that Nonu would remain ordinary if nothing altered her path. How about this, Hayashi said after some thought. If it really doesn't work out, I'll talk to Orochimaru-sensei. He's always wanted an assistant. Kushina gave him a suspicious look. Hayashi knocked her lightly on the head. Orochimaru-sensei is strange, but he understands medical techniques. What he did not say out loud was that Orochimaru was especially knowledgeable about the human body. As for whether Nonu would end up like Kabuto someday, that was something Nawaki would have to worry about. As an older brother, Hayashi could only help this much. All right, Hayashi said, clapping his hands. Let's stop talking about this. It's time for training. Kushina looked like she wanted to say more, but in the end, she only puffed out her cheeks and fell silent. You've used the Rasengan before, Hayashi continued, but after what happened last time, you still haven't mastered it, right? Yes, Kushina admitted. The big fox said he would teach me, but he never did. Inside her mind, the Ninetales, who had been lazily grooming his claws, exploded in anger. I've lived for thousands of years and still have credibility. Every time I tried to teach you, you dragged your feet. Now you blame me, brat. Knowing she was at fault, Kushina pretended not to hear, lips pursed. Hayashi did not notice the exchange. After a moment of thought, he said, the Rasengan requires extremely fine chakra control, which isn't ideal for you right now. I'll teach you another ninjutsu. Really? Kushina's eyes lit up. What is it? Don't worry, it's powerful, Hayashi said, habitually reaching out to pat her head before forming hand seals. Wind release, practice air burst bullet. This technique originated as a basic wind-style ninjutsu, essentially an enhanced version of wind release, practice air bullet. After Hayashi's improvements, the number of hand seals was reduced, and both shape and nature transformation were incorporated, raising its difficulty to A rank. Naturally, he did not plan to teach Kushina the fully enhanced version. It was not stinginess, but practicality. She simply could not handle it yet. For her current level, learning the Rasengan would actually be easier. Under Hayashi's control, a massive sphere of compressed wind chakra formed in his hand. It rapidly expanded until it reached the height of an adult, resembling an enormous jade-colored Rasengan. He hurled the rotating wind sphere into a distant sandpit and immediately pulled Kushina back. The power of the wind-release air burst bullet is high, he warned. If you don't want to be buried in sand, stay back. The explosion followed instantly. The A-rank wind technique erupted violently, sending fine sand raining across the field. Even from a distance, neither of them could completely avoid it. Fortunately, Hayashi reacted quickly, dispersing the falling debris with a wave of wind chakra. Kushina stood frozen. This was the first time she had seen Hayashi use wind-style ninjutsu at this level. She had always known his genjutsu and lightning release were exceptional, but she had never imagined his wind release was just as refined. Coincidentally, wind was her own elemental affinity, yet she rarely used it seriously. She slowly approached the edge of the sand pit and looked down. The once flat terrain had been completely hollowed out, leaving behind a deep, empty crater. Hayashi, she asked softly, how does this compare to the Rasengan? The Rasengan excels at concentrated, seal-less destruction, he replied. But in terms of large-scale damage, even the initial improved version of this technique surpasses it. At its third stage, its power approaches the level of forbidden techniques. I want to learn it, Kushina said immediately, nodding. Hayashi chose to teach her this A-rank wind technique instead of the Rasengan for more than one reason. While the Rasengan demanded precise control, Kushina possessed massive chakra reserves as an Uzumaki, along with the nine tails sealed within her. Letting that power go to waste would be foolish. Charging straight into battle with simple techniques might work for some, but with the option to fight safely and decisively from a distance, there was no need to risk it. Under Kushina's urging, Hayashi patiently explained the required hand seals and the flow of chakra within the body. Her talent was undeniable. After only a few explanations and demonstrations, she began practicing on her own. The November sun was gentle, its warmth spreading comfortably across the training ground. Hayashi was about to find a quiet corner to rest when he heard heavy footsteps approaching. This was not something two girls could produce. When he lazily opened his eyes, he saw a figure that genuinely surprised him. Acha Fugaku. _______. White right pointing backhand index pataion.com/zphyr. Chapter 302, The Price of a Single Eye. 1,349 words. Looking at the figure before him, Hayashi could not hide the surprise on his face. Fugaku usually wore a black windbreaker, his hair neatly styled, his expression calm and polite, yet always carrying a faint sense of pride unique to the Ucha, but today, everything was different. His face was stiff and unreadable, yet sorrow lingered clearly in his eyes. He was no longer dressed as a ninja, instead wearing a loose, plain kimono. Even more striking was the thick bandage covering his left eye. Was his eye injured? Hayashi felt puzzled, but the thought of Izanagi never crossed his mind. After all, that forbidden technique was rarely used unless there was no other choice. It had already been more than 10 days since their last conversation. During that time, there were no rumors circulating in the village about the Ucha clan. Hayashi also had not seen the team escorting the Sand Shinobi again, as if they had vanished overnight. Judging from Fugaku's appearance, something serious had clearly happened. Hayashi suppressed his doubts and was about to stand up when Fugaku placed a hand on his shoulder and, without caring about the dust, sat down beside him on the ground. The sunlight feels warm and comfortable, Fugaku said after a long pause, opening his remaining eye. I never noticed it before. Hayashi smiled faintly. Things that are too ordinary are often the easiest to overlook. That's true, Fugaku replied softly. Especially for a clan like ours that relies on eyes. We're used to staring far away, always thinking the mountain ahead is higher, and end up missing what's right in front of us. Now that I think about it, you never really felt like a typical Ucha. Maybe that's because you don't carry these flaws. Hayashi gave a wry chuckle. If Fugaku was talking about ambition and obsession, then yes, he was indeed an outlier among the Ucha. If I were more like you, Fugaku continued, maybe things wouldn't have turned out this way. Hayashi asked calmly, what happened? Was it an attack by the Sand Shinobi? Fugaku shook his head and briefly recounted everything that had happened. He did not exaggerate or embellish anything. With Hayashi's connections, the truth would have been easy to uncover anyway, so there was no reason to lie. When it came to how he escaped in the end, Fugaku deliberately glossed over the details and said nothing about Izanagi. After listening, Hayashi fell silent for a moment. What were the clan's casualties? Including me, only 7 survived. Hayashi shook his head slowly. You were too impulsive. No matter how strong the Ucha are, a single clan cannot face an entire hidden village head-on. I know, Fugaku said bitterly. But it's too late now. The compensation for the fallen has already been distributed. As the one responsible, I've also resigned as captain of the ANBU unit. Hayashi nodded. Is there something you want me to help with? Fugaku gestured to his bandaged eye. Something went wrong with it during the battle. Can it be treated? It's blind. Hayashi frowned. What about transplantation? Fugaku shook his head. The medical nin in the clan said the optic nerves are completely destroyed. Simply replacing the eye won't work. They had already tried. In the end, they only wasted a Sharingan without restoring his vision. Otherwise, Fugaku would not have come to Hayashi. Hayashi said nothing, quietly thinking things through. At this point, he was almost certain that Fugaku had used Izanagi. If Tsunade had not mentioned it casually before, and if the consequences were not so obvious, even Hayashi might have been deceived. As for why Fugaku concealed it, the reason was clear enough. He was afraid Hayashi would demand compensation for knowledge of such a life-saving forbidden technique. Hayashi laughed inwardly, but kept his expression neutral. You want me to ask Tsunade-sensei to treat you? Yes, Fugaku replied. She treated the Hyuga clan head not long ago. His condition was similar to mine, so I thought. That's true, Hayashi said. But the risk is high. Otherwise, the Hyuga clan wouldn't have waited so long. I'm already blind, Fugaku said quietly. How much worse can it get? Hayashi patted his chest. All right. I'll ask her. But you should know something first. What is it? When I asked her to treat Mikoto, she charged me 300,000 ryo. Hayashi sighed theatrically. I'm her own student, yet when money is involved, she shows no mercy. Tsunade-sensei may look proper, but her medical ethics are questionable at best. You should prepare yourself. Fugaku fell silent. 300,000 ryo was not impossible for the Ucha, but if she charged that much even to her student, how much would she demand from him? In short, Hayashi said, you'll need to explain this clearly to your clan head. Fugaku nodded. I will tell my father. No matter what, thank you for being willing to help. Hayashi smiled. No need to thank me. They stood and walked toward the exit of the training ground. At the entrance, Fugaku suddenly grabbed Hayashi's hand. My father invites you to dinner at our home the night after tomorrow. You must come. Hayashi considered it briefly, then nodded. Thank you for the invitation. I'll be there. Satisfied, Fugaku turned and headed back toward the Ucha compound. After returning home, an Ucha Jonin approached Fugaku. Young clan leader, the clan head is waiting in the study. I understand, Fugaku replied, walking inside. Only Achiyama was in the study. He was reading when Fugaku entered, then looked up and motioned for him to sit. Father. How is it? Achiyama asked. Hayashi agreed to help, Fugaku replied. But Tsunade may demand a high price. Achiyama nodded calmly. As expected. Tsunade is from the Senju clan. Even if she's not bound by old grudges, she won't make things easy. Prepare for it. Fugaku hesitated before asking, why not ask the third Hokuge? We suffered heavy losses. The village should take responsibility. Achiyama interrupted him. Yesterday, Hiruzen Sarutobi showed me a letter from Sunagakure. A letter. They accused us of ambushing them and violating the treaty. Fugaku slammed his hand down angrily. They're the defeated side. How dare they accuse us? Yes, they're defeated, Achiyama said quietly. But were we not also defeated by Hashirama Senju? He leaned back heavily in his chair. Otherwise, why would we be restrained by Hiruzen now? He places responsibility on us, and we can only endure it. Fugaku clenched his fists. Then are we supposed to just let our clan members die like this? Aren't we also part of Konoha? And what about Danzo Shimura? He clearly promised us that no matter what happened. A sharp slap echoed through the room. Enough, Achiyama said coldly. Never say something that foolish again. Remember this well. Promises mean nothing. Only what you control truly matters. Fugaku stared at his father, stunned, then lowered his head. I understand. After a moment, Achiyama sighed, his tone softening. You are still the young clan leader of the Ucha. Even with one eye gone, that does not change. One day, you will lead the strongest clan in Konoha. Your actions affect us all. You must learn restraint. Yes, Fugaku replied quietly. And if Tsunade can repair your nerves, Achiyama continued, I will give you my left eye. What? Fugaku looked up in shock. Do not refuse so quickly, Achiyama said calmly. Blood ties matter to the Ucha. Madara awakened greater power by transplanting his brother's eyes. I may never awaken higher power myself, but I place that hope in you. I am old, you are young. Fugaku knelt on the floor, tears streaming freely. Father, I swear I will restore the glory of the Ucha. Achiyama laughed deeply. I believe you. You are my son. Fugaku wiped his tears. Then what about you? We still have spare eyes in the clan. Do not worry about me, Achiyama said, touching his left eye with a faint, unreadable smile. I have my own plans. Chapter 303, A decision made under the Hokuge's roof. 1,400 words. Hayashi had no idea what had happened inside the Ucha clan head's residence, nor did he have the time or energy to concern himself with it. When training ended in the evening, he instead ran into a rather troublesome matter. Kushina wanted to participate in the Chunin exams. The problem was that she did not have the third Hokage's approval. "Big sister, do you really think you are just an ordinary ninja?" Without exaggeration, if someone forced the third Hokage to choose between the Ninetales Jinchuriki and Asuma, he would not hesitate for even a second before slamming his youngest son into a wall. So how could Kushina possibly make such a decision on her own without even a shred of self-awareness? And more importantly, didn't you tell me the third Hokage already agreed? Hayashi raised his right hand, formed it into a knife shape, and lightly chopped the little fox on the head. "Oh!" Kushina cried out, clutching her head as she immediately darted behind Mikoto for cover. After a moment, she cautiously peeked out and said, "The big fox made me do it." Inside the seal, the Ninetales, who had been watching with great interest, nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. "Why am I always the one getting blamed?" Hayashi remained completely unmoved. "Have you actually spoken to the third Hokage about the Chunin exams?" "I did," Kushina replied honestly. "But he was very vague and said we'd talk about it later." "Then there's still hope," Hayashi said calmly. Kushina immediately leaned halfway out from behind Mikoto. "Really?" The moment she saw Hayashi raise his hand again, she quickly shrank back. Hayashi shook his head, helpless. "Putting that aside, is there anything else you've lied to me about?" "Nope." "Lies don't happen just once," Hayashi replied flatly. "If I catch you again, even Mikoto won't be able to save you." Kushina stuck her head out again and made a face. "Next time, I just won't let you find out." Hayashi fell silent. After some more noisy back and forth, night gradually fell. At Kushina's insistence, the three of them went to a newly opened barbecue restaurant in Konoha and ate until they were full. Once he had walked Kushina and Mikoto back to their respective homes, Hayashi did not return to his own place. Instead, he turned around and headed down the long street toward the Hokage building. It was already 8 in the evening. By his estimate, the third Hokage should be close to finishing his daily paperwork. After being announced by the guarding ninja, Hayashi soon entered the office on the 3rd floor. This was not his first visit. As always, the room was piled high with documents. Being Hokage was truly exhausting. He glanced at the scene and sighed internally, but did not dwell on it. Seeing him enter, the third Hokage closed the file in his hands, took a slow puff from his pipe, and exhaled white smoke that drifted lazily toward the window. "Hayashi, you're here," the old man said with a gentle smile. "Come, have a seat." "Yes, Uncle Hokage," Hayashi replied, nodding as he sat down. The third Hokage was visibly pleased by the familiar form of address. At the very least, it showed that time had not created distance between them. He preferred bonds built on emotion rather than a cold relationship of authority. "What have you been busy with lately?" the third Hokage asked. "Nothing special," Hayashi replied. "Team 1 was disbanded, so I've been training Mikoto and Kushina." "I've heard," the third Hokage said with a nod. "That's the right approach. Jiraiya and Tsunade neglect their duties far too often. One's always gambling, the other is obsessed with research. As for Orochimaru, he's officially Team 1's instructor, yet he leaves everything to you. None of them give me peace of mind." After chatting for a while, the third Hokage turned to the main issue. "So, why did you come to see me so late?" Hayashi brought up Kushina's request directly. The third Hokage pondered briefly before speaking. "She mentioned it to me as well, but I did not agree. You must understand something. Ever since that kidnapping incident, Kushina's identity as the Ninetales Jinchuriki has reached the desks of every Koge. If she participates in the Chunin exams, how can her safety be guaranteed?" "Uncle Hokage," Hayashi replied, "setting aside the fact that the exams are being held in our village, can we really restrict Kushina for her entire life? I've seen the One-Tails and the Four-Tails Jinchuriki on the battlefield. Their presence alone changes the tide of war. That kind of power." The third Hokage frowned. "You actually want her on the battlefield? I thought, given your relationship, you would want to protect her from danger." Hayashi shook his head. "It's precisely because of our relationship that she must go through this. No matter how strong you or I are, we can never be her final safeguard. The only true safeguard is herself." The third Hokage fell silent. "Konoha is safe," he said slowly. Hayashi sighed. If it were truly safe, she wouldn't have been taken by the Cloud Ninja. Even inside the village, danger can come knocking. When that happens, she can only rely on herself. Right now, Kushina has enormous power but very little combat experience. She's like a child holding a weapon too heavy for her hands. For the sake of the village, and for her own sake, she should be allowed to grow, not locked away like a prisoner. I believe this is what Grandma Mito would have wanted. The third Hokage was silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a long sigh. Lady Mito confined herself to a small courtyard for 20 years, he said quietly. Part of it was grief, but part of it was because we were too weak. If the first Hokage were still alive, where in this world could he not go? He took another deep puff from his pipe and gestured for Hayashi to come closer. The two stood by the window. In the distance, the village lights were bright and lively. Nearby, smoke curled gently in the quiet night. When I was around your age, the third Hokage continued, the first Hokage handed the village to my teacher after the war. Later, he took Lady Mito across the land of whirlpools, the Senju ancestral lands, and beyond. Looking back now, perhaps he already knew how her life would end and wanted to give her those memories in advance. His voice softened. Before she passed, I promised her that Kushina would live like a normal ninja. I failed to keep that promise. After another pause, he spoke again. You're right. Let her participate in the Chunin exams. As for missions beyond that, we'll take things step by step. I am Hokage, but the village is not mine alone. Especially not when it comes to the Nine Tails. The elders will oppose this, so we must proceed carefully. Hayashi nodded. That was enough for now. Is there anything else? The third Hokage asked. Hayashi immediately understood the implication. The young Uchiha clan head came to see me today. He wanted me to ask Tsunade-sama about treating his eye. The third Hokage nodded. He already knew. He retrieved a scroll from a shelf and handed it over. This is a letter from Sunigakure. Read it. Hayashi opened it. The contents accused Konoha's escort unit of launching an ambush and causing heavy losses. After a while, the third Hokage spoke heavily. The losses are real, and the rest is mostly true. Fugaku struck first. I must protect my villagers, but I cannot ignore treaties or the council. If I pursue Sunigakure now, it would be seen as provocation. So I can only suppress the issue. It's all for the village. He looked at Hayashi seriously. You understand me, don't you? Hayashi finally understood why the third Hokage had said all this. He was afraid Hayashi would drift away from the village. The third Hokage grasped his hand firmly. The future of Konoha depends on you. Hayashi walked out of the Hokage building in a daze. If he did not possess a mature soul and firm values, he truly might have been persuaded completely. But one thing was now crystal clear. Talk no Jutsu was real, and its power was terrifying. Chapter 304, The Price of a Pair of Eyes. 1,365 words. The training ground within the Senju clan territory was quiet, broken only by the sound of breathing and the occasional thud of bodies hitting the ground. Tsunade leaned lazily against a wooden stake. Her posture looked relaxed, yet her presence carried an undeniable pressure. Her brows lifted and fell as she spoke, her mood clearly high, her tone carrying the confidence of someone used to making decisions that others could not refuse. Actually, the third Hokage isn't wrong, she said casually. He may have wronged the Uchiha clan, but compared to the entire village, what is one clan worth? If something truly goes wrong, forget about you people, he could even abandon the Hyuga. She paused briefly, then continued without waiting for a response. And Uchiyama isn't wrong either. As clan head, it's his responsibility to fight for the interests of his people. Hayashi stood quietly in front of her, saying nothing. His expression was calm, but his eyes flicked toward Nawaki, who was sprawled on the ground nearby, utterly exhausted. The look clearly told him to interrupt his sister if possible. Unfortunately, Nawaki was in no condition to save anyone. This was the first time Hayashi had realized that Tsunade could be this talkative. He already regretted accepting this task. But he had no choice. Tomorrow, he was going to the clan head's residence. That dinner was not a simple meal, it was meant to produce a clear answer, as well as discuss Tsunade's conditions. That was why, after finishing his meeting with the third Hokage, he had immediately come to find her. The problem was that she had been talking for more than an hour, and there was no sign of her stopping. Perhaps satisfied with Hayashi's patience, Tsunade continued for another half hour before finally clearing her throat and delivering her conclusion. There's only one truth in this world, she said. People just see it differently depending on where they stand. You understand what I've been saying, right? Hayashi nodded. Teacher Tsunade, I understand. You mean the third Hokage isn't wrong, the clan head isn't wrong, and you are even less wrong. Tsunade grinned. Smart. But, Hayashi continued slowly, that still doesn't explain why you ask for a mine the moment you open your mouth. That price is too high. How am I supposed to negotiate that? Tsunade's brows shot up, disappointment flashing in her eyes. Then you still don't understand. She straightened and spoke bluntly. With Konoha's current level of medical ninjutsu, they might be able to perform this surgery in another 5 years. Can Achiyama let his son wait that long? Right now, I'm the only one who can do it. I earn my living with my skills. Do you still think I'm asking for too much? But? Tsunade cut him off, standing up abruptly. There are no buts. You underestimate Fugaku's importance as the young clan head, and you also underestimate your clan's wealth. A single mine is not a big deal. At most, it's a medium-sized loss. She paused, then lowered her voice, temptation evident in her tone. We split the profits 3 to 7. 3 parts go to you. Even if you end up crippled on the battlefield one day, you won't need to take missions anymore. You can live comfortably for the rest of your life. For reasons he could not explain, that comparison made Hayashi feel a chill run through his lower body. And besides, did he really look like someone short on money? He had completed countless S-rank missions. His savings were already more than enough to last a lifetime. Even if you added another 0. He froze. For a brief, dangerous moment, it actually sounded very tempting. Coughing lightly, Hayashi thumped his chest. Teacher Tsunade, don't worry. It's just a mine. I'll make sure it happens. The clan head's money will be split 3 to 7. Don't forget that. Tsunade laughed softly. I'm counting on you. Then I'll leave Nawaki to your special training, Hayashi said. I'll head back first. He walked a slow circle around Nawaki, then casually stuffed the slug that was about to slide off into Nawaki's nostril. Without another word, he turned and left with an unhurried stride. The following days passed peacefully. Hayashi occasionally guided Mikoto and Kushina in their training, spent time reading scrolls, and handled routine matters. Before he realized it, the appointed day had arrived. This was only the second time he had entered the clan head's residence. Led by Fugaku, Hayashi walked toward the main hall. Ha ha, our Uchiha hero has arrived, Achiyama's hearty laughter rang out as he emerged from the hall. My apologies for not greeting you sooner. Clan head, you're too kind, Hayashi replied with a polite smile. The three of them entered the reception hall together. This was a private banquet, and no one else was present. After they sat down, Achiyama lifted his teacup, gently blew away the steam, and spoke casually. Come to think of it, this is only your second visit here. Fugaku invited you many times before, but you never came. Why keep such distance? I've been busy, Hayashi answered honestly. The war kept me tied up. There wasn't much free time. Achiyama chuckled and shook his head. Still distant. But speaking of the war, you brought great honor to the Uchiha clan. Everyone in the village says you're the most outstanding of the younger generation. Fugaku even suggested rewarding you properly some time ago, didn't you? Fugaku put down his cup and nodded. According to clan rules, you should be rewarded with a ninjutsu from the Uchiha secret scrolls. No need to complicate things, Achiyama said with a wave of his hand. I've already had a list copied. It'll be sent to your home later. Hayashi hesitated briefly. Thank you, clan head, brother Fugaku. But is there something you need me to do? Yama shook his head. You've already done more than enough. Especially going to Tsunade for Fugaku's sake. He paused. However, there is one matter I want to discuss. Please speak. You're a jonin now, and a hero of Konoha. The clan admires you greatly. When do you plan to return to the Uchiha police force? I've even kept a squad leader position open for you. So this was it. Hayashi smiled inwardly, but answered without hesitation. Since the clan head says so, I naturally won't refuse. However, I'm still responsible for Team 1. What about the third Hokage? I'll handle Sarutobi Hiruzen, Yama said calmly. Hayashi nodded. Whatever confidence the clan head had, he chose not to question it. With the pleasantries over, Hayashi went straight to the point and relayed Tsunade's conditions. What? A mine? Fugaku blurted out before Achiyama could react. Hayashi, are you sure you heard that correctly? Fugaku asked sharply. Did Tsunade really say that? Hayashi nodded. I thought I misheard too. I asked again. She didn't even bother explaining, she just kicked me out. This is outrageous. Fugaku clenched his teeth and turned to his father. Father, we won't treat it. Enough, Achiyama snapped. He glared at Fugaku before turning back to Hayashi. Did Tsunade insist on this price? Yes. She also said only she can perform the surgery. Ichihayama nodded slowly. He did not doubt it. In all these years, no one who used Izanagi had ever regained their sight. If changing eyes were enough, it would not be a forbidden jutsu. Truthfully, he had not held much hope when he first asked Hayashi to inquire. But Tsunade's demand made it clear that she was serious. He was willing to exchange a mine for his son's eyesight. A mine would affect the clan, but not fatally. But he was unwilling. In recent years, Tsunade seemed to squander the Senju fortune, yet in reality, she was steadily transferring their assets to the village. The family's wealth was gradually becoming part of Konoha itself. Before long, that mine would likely fall into the third Hokage's hands. That was why Achiyama hesitated. In the end, it all came down to one thing. They lacked the technology. _______. White right pointing backhand index patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 305, 305, Names Yet to Come. 1,490 words. The dinner ended on a pleasant note, aside from the matter of the mine. As Tsunade had said, there was only one truth in the world, but people saw it differently depending on where they stood. From Hayashi's perspective, opposing the village or chasing after so-called clan autonomy was a dead end. Ichihayama and his son were pushing a broken carriage forward at reckless speed, and the only possible ending was complete destruction. Unless that carriage stopped, or someone else took the reins. Neither of those choices was something Hayashi could decide right now. There was no reason for him to offend the third Hokage over something that was not yet his to claim. That did not mean he would allow the Uchiha clan to be destroyed. Even if his sense of belonging to the clan was weak, he would not simply watch it collapse. If things truly reached an irreconcilable point, he would not hesitate to use decisive methods to eliminate a few troublesome flies. Since the message had been delivered and both sides had gained what they wanted, Hayashi stood and took his leave at 7 o'clock. Ichihayama nodded and gestured for his son to see him out. Brother Fugaku, this is far enough, Hayashi said as they reached the main entrance. Your eyesight isn't good. You should rest more. The two exchanged a few polite words. Fugaku did not insist further. Tsunade's demands had clearly unsettled him. Hayashi, I won't say much, Fugaku said quietly. The village treats us like enemies. We must stand united. I'll be waiting for you in the police force. Hayashi only smiled, waved once, and turned toward the street leading home. Fugaku remained at the entrance, the cold wind tugging at his clothes, until Hayashi's figure disappeared into the night. Only then did he turn back. After leaving the clan head's residence, Hayashi did not return to his small house. With only Little Black waiting at home and no one to talk to, he chose instead to wander the streets alone. Time passed slowly. The wind grew sharper and streetlights flickered on in the distance. Now and then, a few pedestrians hurried by, their footsteps echoing faintly. Just as Hayashi reached the end of the road, scattered snowflakes began to drift down. The clouds were thin, and patches of the dark night sky were visible. It felt like the snow would not last long. Even so, seeing snow in November was rare. Suddenly, a bright voice broke his thoughts. Sister, it's snowing. Look, it's snowing. I see it. Slow down. Hayashi looked up. On a bench not far away sat two figures. As his gaze lingered, he felt a jolt of recognition. The young man who had stood up looked familiar. Uchiha Rui. Yes, that should be his name. It had been years since graduation, but it came back to him quickly. After all, it was a name one did not easily forget. Some names carried an odd weight to them. Death flags were not things to raise lightly. Over time, those flags had evolved from words into actions, then into thoughts, and eventually even into hairstyles. But this one was something else entirely. Naming yourself Uchiha Rui was practically tempting fate. That was why seeing him here, alive and energetic, surprised Hayashi. While Hayashi was still lost in thought, the mischievous child had already pointed in his direction. Sister, look. There's a pervert over there. He's been staring at us. Hayashi froze. Before he could respond, Uchiha Rui stormed over, his steps full of bravado. He had brought his sister out for a walk. They had even caught the last snow of Konoha year 32. Everything had been perfect until some suspicious stranger ruined it. How could he tolerate that? There was no time to call his friends. Rolling up his sleeves, Rui prepared to handle things himself. But as he got closer, his expression stiffened. He had recognized the so-called pervert. Among the younger generation of Konoha, 5 names stood above all others: Sakumo the White Fang, the 3 Sannin, and Lightning Flash. Not only were they powerful, they had also earned terrifying military reputations, becoming idols for countless ninja. What made it worse was that Lightning Flash, Hayashi, was only 12 years old. Such talent was rare not just in Konoha, but in the entire ninja world. As his former classmate, Rui felt it more deeply than anyone. During their time at the Ninja Academy, he had suffered more than enough at Hayashi's hands. Hayashi, for his part, would insist it was all for academy points. In short, seeing the great menace appear before him now made Rui feel as if his fate had already been sealed. Why are you here? Rui stammered. I was just passing by, Hayashi replied calmly. By the way, did you forget to wear warm clothes? Your legs are shaking. That's none of your business. Oh. Hayashi smiled faintly. Quite bold. Where are your lackeys? They have nothing to do with this. If there's a problem, come at me. Hayashi was about to speak again when a voice called out from the bench. Rui, is that your friend? Why don't you call him over? Without waiting for an answer, Hayashi waved casually. I'm Rui's classmate. We'll come over now. Rui panicked. What are you planning to do? Nothing, Hayashi said. Relax. Your sister is calling us. Rui clenched his teeth and stepped in front of him. Hayashi, we'll settle things later. You can hit me or scold me, whatever you want. But please don't mention anything about the Sand Shinobi or the escort mission in front of my sister. I'm begging you. Why? Hayashi asked. My brother-in-law was part of the escort team, Rui said quietly. He didn't come back. Hayashi hesitated. Before he could decide what to do, Rui's sister waved again. I understand, Hayashi said softly. Crossing the road, he finally realized he had been careless. Rui's sister was heavily pregnant. Hayashi turned and shot Rui a sharp look. What are you thinking? Letting your sister stay outside in this cold. Rui froze, but his sister smiled gently. It's not his fault. I wanted to come out myself. Staying in the hospital all the time feels suffocating. The medical ninja said light walks are fine. I used to be a Chunin. My body can handle it. Hearing that, Hayashi relaxed. This was the ninja world, after all. I was rude earlier, Hayashi said. My name is Hayashi. I was Rui's classmate. I'm Kyoko, she replied with a nod. I thought you looked familiar, Kyoko continued softly. So you really are that Konoha hero. Your photo is even displayed at the village entrance. Her voice was gentle, dimples appearing when she smiled. She was completely different from her brother. Feeling ignored, Rui protested. Sister, you said you were a Chunin. How come I never knew? That was 6 years ago, Kyoko said thoughtfully. I was 17, and you were only 6. After I married your brother-in-law, I retired. It's normal you don't remember. I'm 12 now, Rui said proudly. I passed the Chunin exams this time. I've already surpassed you. Kyoko laughed. Surpassing me isn't much. Hayashi-kun is already a Jonin. That's different, Rui muttered. You can't compare people to monsters. Watching them, Hayashi felt a quiet sense of envy. Having a sister like that must be nice. Are your friends taking the exam too? Kyoko asked. Rui lowered his head. No. Only Acha Yutaka and I are left. Acha Rei, he died at the daimyo's mansion. Hayashi said nothing. His heart barely stirred. He had seen too much death. Familiar faces and strangers alike. This was how people grew. As Orochimaru once said, after seeing it enough times, anyone would get used to it, until they became numb. It was terrifying, heartless, and unavoidable. That was why the Ucha were a clan of deep love, yet also of ruthless resolve, especially those who awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan. They lost what they cherished most. After that, emotional waves rarely touched them again. Sensing the mood grow heavy, Hayashi changed the subject. Kyoko-san, how far along are you? About 6 months, she said, resting a hand on her belly. The due date should be February or March. Do you want a boy or a girl? Either is fine, Kyoko replied with a hopeful smile. I just want the child to live peacefully. Strength isn't important. Rui immediately objected, shouting toward her stomach. Don't listen to her. You should grow up strong and handsome like your uncle. Kyoko and Hayashi exchanged a glance and laughed. Have you chosen a name? Hayashi asked. Yes. My husband chose it before his mission. What is it? Kyoko caught a snowflake in her palm. It melted instantly. Tilting her head, she said softly, if it's a girl, Shiko. If it's a boy? Obito. Acha. Obito. Chapter 306, 306, The Weight of Foreknowledge. 1,347 words. In Steven Spielberg's film Minority Report, a concept is presented where crimes can be foreseen, and criminals are punished before the crime ever takes place. Putting aside the logical issue of how one could ever verify the accuracy of such a prediction once the supposed criminal has already been executed, and the predicted future erased, and also setting aside the philosophical question of whether a future that can be predicted and altered can still be called the future at all, there remains only one core problem. If it is known that someone will commit a crime in the future, is it justifiable to punish them in advance? This was a dilemma countless transmigrators had faced. And now, Acha Hayashi faced it as well. Obito, the future mastermind who would manipulate the Nine Tails into destroying Konoha, a direct participant in the Acha clan massacre, the supreme commander behind the Akatsuki and Kabuto's forces during the unprecedented Fourth Great Ninja War, and one of the key executors of the Eye of the Moon plan. And now, that same Obito was nothing more than a barely formed embryo. Should Hayashi kill Obito in advance? Or rather, should he sneak into Kyoko's hospital room late at night and end 2 lives with a single strike, cutting off every future disaster at the root? This thought lingered in his mind for a long time, yet he ultimately chose not to act. Mercy? No. This had nothing to do with mercy. The very first lesson Orochimaru had taught him was that a ninja must never show mercy. During their first mission, Hayashi, Mikoto, and Nawaki had already killed unarmed civilians, including women and children. If he truly decided to act, Hayashi would not hesitate in the slightest. The real question was whether doing so would actually solve anything. At the end of the day, Obito was merely a piece personally chosen by Madara. The true roots of everything lay with Black Zetsu and Madara himself. This was not to say Obito was redeemable. The massacres he carried out in Rin's name could never be erased. However, even if Obito were eliminated now, would Madara, lurking in the shadows, not simply choose another successor? As long as Madara remained alive, there would always be another Obito. Rather than facing an unknown enemy, it was far better to face one he understood completely. The ninja world was, at its core, a world driven by information. Naruto's victory over pain had relied heavily on intelligence. Hayashi possessed knowledge of the plot itself. He knew exactly what Obito would become and what abilities his Mangekyo Sharingan would grant him. This was the greatest advantage a transmigrator could have. So why take the long road? Because of that, Hayashi's real concern was not Obito being chosen, but Obito not being chosen. That possibility was very real. As a butterfly that had flapped its wings countless times, Hayashi had already altered the timeline beyond recognition. If Madara chose someone else instead, it would not surprise him at all. At present, he worried about 2 things. The first was Itachi being chosen by Madara. During the Battle of Kanobi Bridge, Itachi would already have been 3 or 4 years old. If Madara simply waited a few more years, he might find a far more intriguing candidate than Obito. Itachi was frighteningly close to perfect. While Itachi's Mangekyo might not have been as broken as Obito's, his most terrifying trait was not his raw power, but his intellect. A fully healthy Itachi enhanced with Hashirama's cells, combined with that mind, was a nightmare Hayashi had no desire to face. Obito, at least, was manageable. When wearing the mask, his intelligence seemed intact, but once that mask shattered, he often behaved like someone who had lost half his brain. Compared to Itachi, he was a far inferior opponent. That said, given current developments, whether Itachi would even be born remained uncertain. Which led to Hayashi's second concern. What if Madara chose him instead? Obito had an age advantage over Itachi, but Hayashi held the same advantage over Obito. The similarities were unsettling. Both were orphans, both had been taken as disciples by figures outside their clan, both stood apart from the average Ucha. It was almost as if they were following the same script. The only difference was that Hayoshi's current strength was far higher. But in Madara's eyes, that meant nothing. If Madara wished, he could create multiple pairs of Mangekyo Sharingan with ease. Because of that, Hayashi could not help but remain wary. An outstanding person like him was impossible to truly hide. No matter where he stood, he was like a firefly in the darkness, impossible to ignore. In short, Hayashi had many concerns. But regardless of whom Madara might choose in the future, acting against Obito now was unnecessary. Setting aside the 10-plus-year window, killing someone inside the village would be the most foolish decision possible. After chatting a bit longer, Hayashi headed back to his home. As the clan head, Uchiyama would not go back on his word once it was given. So when Hayashi saw a scroll hanging from the handle of his front door, he was not surprised in the slightest. As for whether someone might steal it, that was laughable. This was the Uchiha clan compound. Who would dare steal something here, and did anyone think the Uchiha shinobi hidden nearby were decorations? The messenger left the moment Hayashi returned, and he brought the scroll inside without another thought. This was not the Uchiha secret tome. Like the scroll the third Hokage had sent previously, it contained a brush marked with a special seal. After opening it and skimming through the contents, the first technique that caught his eye was something called human bomb. For a moment, Hayashi wondered if some extremist group had transmigrated into the Uchiha clan. After reading a bit more, he lost interest entirely. This so-called human bomb technique relied on the Ketsuraigan to function. Leaving aside the question of how powerful it might be, he had only ever heard of the Sharingan. What was a Ketsuraigan supposed to be? Hayashi frowned and read the explanation again. It turned out the Ketsuraigan was the bloodline limit of the Chinoite clan, a family that had once been imprisoned by the Uchiha. Their secret techniques had been obtained during that time. Even so, it was meaningless to him. No matter how powerful a technique was, if it required a bloodline he did not possess, it might as well not exist. A bad feeling rose in his chest as he continued reading. Sure enough, the rest of the scroll was filled with similar techniques. They looked impressive on paper but were completely impractical. Every single one either required a specific bloodline limit or a lost training method. In other words, they were unusable. This scroll was nothing more than a record of foreign secret techniques the Uchiha clan had collected over the past 1,000 years. Who exactly was this meant to fool? He could not help but curse under his breath. Flipping further down, Hayashi found no trace of Madara's legendary fire release techniques, nor any forbidden jutsu like Izanagi or Izanami. Given Madara's personality, there was no reason for him to destroy such techniques. He had not even taken the Sage of Six Paths stone tablet, so those techniques had to still exist within the clan. They were simply hidden by Uchiyama. There were a few advanced ninjutsu recorded here, but every single one was also present in the scroll left behind by Kagami. At this point, it was clear that Uchiyama understood Kagami far too well. Hayashi let out a quiet sigh. After carefully sorting through the contents, he finally selected a single support-type ninjutsu. That, at least, was worth learning. _______. Multiple chapters are already available on my Patreon. You can check it out if you want to read ahead. There are 100+ chapters on each work, with 2 daily chapters. White right pointing backhand index patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 307, When Laziness Ends. 1,186 words. Laziness was a common illness shared by almost everyone. Humans were creatures who, once they stopped moving, became reluctant to act again, especially when food and shelter were no longer a concern. This flaw was perfectly embodied in Hayashi. Otherwise, he would not have stayed in the ninja academy for a full 5 years without graduating, even after Nishimura-sensei had hinted more than once that he could leave early. Graduating early was never an option. If not for the war, Hayashi would have been perfectly content to unlock the title of strongest genin. That sounded far cooler and more satisfying than becoming something like Konoha's lightning flash. As the saying goes, people are only pushed into action when forced. The third Hokage took a slow drag from his pipe before calmly uttering those words. Hayashi pretended not to understand, wearing an expression of pure confusion. The third Hokage sighed. At that age, he had not possessed such shameless skill at playing dumb. Kids these days were truly something else. Still, he had no intention of speaking in riddles any longer. Hayashi, the third Hokage said, getting straight to the point, how long has it been since Team 1 last went on a mission? Just as expected. Hayashi gave an awkward laugh. It hasn't been that long, has it? The third Hokage exhaled slowly. It may not sound long, but it's already December. In other words, since the war ended, Team 1 has not carried out a single mission. Silence followed. You should understand how busy the village has been recently, the third Hokage continued. For the sake of missions, I even sent out Sakumo while he was in the middle of a blind date. Hayashi nodded without speaking. Ordinary ninja had no room to refuse missions assigned by the Hokage, especially during wartime, when the Hokage's authority was absolute. If not for his relationship with the third Hokage, combined with the fact that this was peacetime, he would never have been able to delay things for so long. Seeing that Hayashi did not resist, the third Hokage smiled faintly in satisfaction and continued, I am not forcing you for no reason. This mission is closely related to you. Do you remember the 12 Guardian Ninja? Yes, Hayashi replied immediately. Of course he remembered. Back then, he had nearly wiped them out, which eventually led to the Uchiha clan being summoned to the daimyo's residence and triggered a chain of subsequent events. That man from that day, Ryoma, the third Hokage said slowly. You never saw his body, did you? That's right, Hayashi answered. Is this mission about him? The third Hokage nodded. After escaping, he did not return to the daimyo's side. Instead, he disappeared. Recently, intelligence suggests that he has appeared in a place called Baker Town. Where? Hayashi blurted out instinctively. Baker Town, the third Hokage repeated, looking puzzled. Is something wrong? No, nothing, Hayashi replied after a brief pause. The name just sounds familiar. That's normal, the third Hokage said. Baker Town has the worst public security in the entire Land of Fire. Criminals exiled by the daimyo gather there. Fights, murders, strange deaths, they happen every day. Hayashi nodded with understanding. It was essentially the ninja world's version of Gotham. So what is Ryoma doing there? He asked. The third Hokage chose his words carefully. This is an old matter. The current daimyo is the younger brother of the previous one. After inheriting the position, he exiled the former daimyo's son to Baker Town for certain reasons. And Ryoma has made contact with him, Hayashi said, frowning. Yes, the third Hokage confirmed. They are preparing to launch a coup. Hayashi was momentarily stunned. This was practically a ninja version of Hamlet. Konoha does not interfere in disputes between daimyos, the third Hokage continued. However, there is one issue. As he spoke, he pushed aside the documents on his desk and unfolded a map of the Land of Fire. When Hayashi stepped closer, the third Hokage pointed to a specific area. This is Baker Town. As you can see, it is close to the river mouth. Previously, a large number of ninja were stationed nearby to guard against sneak attacks from Kirigakure. But now, he continued, we have concluded the war with Tsunagakure, and conflicts with Iwagakure and Kumogakure are also coming to an end. The second Great Ninja War is nearly over. Because of this, those ninja units were withdrawn recently. The third Hokage paused before adding, just days after the withdrawal, Ryoma appeared and began supporting the former daimyo's son. Hayashi narrowed his eyes. You suspect Kirigakure? The third Hokage nodded. Kirigakure did not participate in the war. Being isolated overseas, they suffered little loss. It would not be strange for them to take advantage of the situation. Hayashi thought for a moment. Since the third Hokage dared to make such a claim, it was clearly supported by reliable intelligence. So what is my task? He asked. The third Hokage's tone turned solemn. Eliminate the rogue guardian ninja Ryoma. At the same time, investigate whether Kirigakure is involved. If you encounter Kirigakure ninja, kill them if possible. If not, allow them to withdraw. Because this involves the Land of Water, the mission is temporarily classified as A rank. Konoha's strength was undeniable. With the Sannin, Sakumo, and a rising generation led by Hayashi, the third Hokage's decisions at this stage were decisive and uncompromising. This was not the hesitant leader he would become decades later. Do not pursue too deeply, the third Hokage added after a moment. Young people are prone to acting rashly. The sea is Kirigakure's territory, and the Land of Water is far from here. There is no need to chase them. Understood, Hayashi nodded. After a brief pause, he asked, should Minato and Nawaki be recalled? The third Hokage shook his head without hesitation. No. Jiraiya took Minato to Mount Miyaboku, and Tsunade brought Nawaki out as well. It is too late to recall them. Then it will be just Mikoto and me. Hayashi asked. The third Hokage gave him a strange look. Isn't there also Himeji? I heard you promised long ago to take her on a mission. Hayashi fell silent. The third Hokage smiled knowingly. I asked her a few days ago, and she refused me outright. She gave no face to the third Hokage at all. He chuckled. It seems you are the only one with enough influence. Hayashi laughed awkwardly. In truth, his reasoning was simple. With Himeji on the team, the lineup was far more balanced. At the very least, he would not have to handle reconnaissance alone. The Byakugan's strategic value was undeniable. Although Himeji was officially a special Jonin, her actual combat ability was on par with a standard Jonin. Minato and Nawaki had enormous potential, but they were still growing. Right now, their combat power could not compare to Himeji's. Even with only 3 people, Hayashi was quite satisfied with this team composition. That said, he knew better than to be careless. After all, the destination was Baker Town. Chapter 308, First Clash by the Sea. 1178 words. In December of Konoha year 32, just before the year came to an end, Uchiha Hayashi led the incomplete team 1 out of the village to begin their mission. According to the map, Mihana Town was located near the sea, far from Konoha. If Hayashi were traveling alone, he could reach the destination in a single day. However, this was a team mission, and he deliberately slowed the pace. In truth, Mikoto's speed had already become impressive. The Sharingan enhanced her physical coordination, and when combined with lightning release chakra stimulating her leg muscles, her burst speed was already comparable to Himeji's. That said, this kind of explosive movement was only suitable for short sprints. Mikoto had not yet reached the level where she could maintain such speed over long distances. Hayashi had no intention of forcing her beyond her limits, especially when the third Hokage had given them a full month to complete the mission. There was no need to rush. Before leaving, Hayashi had also given Mikoto and Himeji a very serious warning. If they encountered a man wearing black-rimmed glasses, and if his name also contained the character Jiang, then they were to abandon all other thoughts and retreat immediately. Although the warning sounded strange and lacked any explanation, both girls agreed without hesitation. Trust did not require understanding. 2 days later, in a forest not far from Konoha, 3 figures leaped rapidly across the tree branches. They moved in a wedge formation. Hayashi took the lead, Mikoto covered the right flank, and Himeji guarded the left. The journey had been uneventful so far. The team advanced steadily along their planned route. Since their mission in the Land of Rivers, this level of coordination had already become instinctive. None of them were inexperienced, so there was little need for constant communication. Hayashi glanced at the sky. It was already afternoon. Fortunately, they were not far from Mihana Town. At their current pace, they would arrive before sunset. Suddenly, Himeji, who had kept her Byakugan active the entire time, spoke with urgency. Enemies detected. For a clock direction, approximately 1 kilometer away. Hayashi raised his hand, signaling the team to stop. Number, he asked calmly. 4. They have not noticed us yet and appear to be stationary. Hayashi nodded. This was the advantage of the Byakugan. With a detection range of up to 1 kilometer, it allowed them to discover enemies long before contact. If Himeji were not with them, this might have turned into an ambush. But now, the initiative was firmly in their hands. Advance toward the 4 o'clock direction, Hayashi ordered. Encountering ninja in such a remote area meant one thing. They were almost certainly not Konoha ninja. And if they were not allies, then probing their strength was necessary. The moment the command was given, Hayashi rushed forward. Mikoto reacted instantly, lightning release chakra stimulating her legs as her speed surged. Himeji followed closely, accelerating without hesitation. The dense forest concealed their movements. When the distance closed to 500 meters, the enemy finally noticed the 3 figures charging toward them. For Hayashi, this distance was already dangerously close. Especially now, with his taijutsu having undergone another leap forward. At full strength, he might still be slightly inferior to Sakumo, but he was already on par with Orochimaru. When they were less than 20 meters apart, Hayashi formed hand seals in one smooth motion. Lightning chakra gathered in his palm, crackling violently as his speed surged once more. Kaidori. The nearest enemy barely had time to raise his kunai before Hayashi appeared in front of him. A flash of blue light filled his vision, and the lightning-wrapped hand pierced straight through his skull. The kill was instantaneous. Hayashi did not slow down. He twisted his body and charged toward the man further back who clearly looked like the leader. The distinctive white hair and the red marking between his eyebrows made it obvious. There was no way the one who just died was the captain. So the third Hokage's intelligence had been accurate. Mihana Town truly was connected to Kirigakure. After all, the Kagaya clan ninja standing before him could not be fake. Although Hayashi did not yet know why Miss Ninja had appeared here, answers could be extracted later. Seeing Hayashi rush toward him, killing intent flashed in the man's eyes. A ferocious grin spread across his face. "Very good," he said coldly. "You dare to kill my subordinate, Kagaya Hikaru. Then you will join him in the grave." 10-finger drilling bullets. In an instant, finger bones shot from his hands like bullets. At the same time, he tore an arm bone from his shoulder, shaping it into a bone blade as he lunged forward. Hayashi did not slow down. With a flick of his wrists, 10 shuriken flew out, each one precisely striking a finger bone midair and knocking them aside. In the same motion, he raised his right arm horizontally, formed hand seals with one hand, and drew chakra into his throat as he leaned back slightly. Fire release, great fireball technique. A massive fireball roared forward, lighting up the forest. Kagaya Hikaru's eyes gleamed with excitement. The Kagaya clan were born fighters, and facing a genius only thrilled him further. Shikosumiyaku, Bone Shield. Bone surged up from the ground, forming a solid white barrier that blocked the flames head-on. Seeing his attack fail, Hayashi drew a kunai, leapt over the bone shield, and closed the distance once more. Dance of the Camellia. The two crossed paths in a flash. Cold steel collided with bone as the kunai struck the bone blade. Chakra surged violently, cracking the ground beneath their feet. Hayashi's eyelid twitched when he saw the chipped edge of his kunai. Shikosumiyaku truly lived up to its reputation. Bones reinforced with chakra were actually harder than forged steel. In the distance, Mikoto and Himeji had already engaged the remaining enemies. Without hesitation, Hayashi fought while retreating, drawing Kagaya Hikaru farther away from the battlefield. However, Hikaru believed he had gained the upper hand. With a savage roar, he lunged forward as his body began to spin violently. Dance of the Willow. Bone spikes erupted from his body as he spun like a living weapon, slashing toward Hayashi. Kaidori Nagashi. Lightning burst outward from Hayashi's body, spreading in every direction like sharp quills, forming a defensive field. For a moment, it worked. Then, the arm bone pierced straight through the lightning. Boom! Hayashi raised his kunai just in time to block the strike, but the force sent him flying backward. A muffled groan escaped his throat as he crashed into the ground. Damn it! Hayashi cursed inwardly. He had forgotten something crucial. The primary component of bone was calcium carbonate. It did not conduct electricity. This was truly an insult to his physical education sensei. _______. Multiple chapters are already available on my Patreon. You can check it out if you want to read ahead. There are 100+ chapters on each work, with 2 daily chapters. White right pointing backhand index patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 309, Lightning that ends the dance. 967 words. When the boy was knocked back by the blow, Kagaya Hikari surged forward like a black shadow, charging straight at him once more. Earth Release, Earth Spear. This time, Uchiha Hayashi activated his Earth Release. The ground surged violently as countless sharp stone spikes erupted upward like spears, filling the area in front of him. Dance of the Turban. A thick, elongated bone burst from Kagaya Hikari's body. He spun through the air like a crazed dancer, the bone sweeping in a wide arc and cleanly slicing apart every stone spear in its path. Objectively speaking, an ability that combined both offense and defense was extremely troublesome. That was precisely why Orochimaru remained obsessed with Shikosumiyaku. That said, Orochimaru's fixation bordered on exaggeration. Even the Kagaya clan themselves had never claimed their bloodline to be flawless. Since the era of the Sage of Six Paths, among the great clans that survived to the present day, the Kagaya had never stood at the very top. If Orochimaru had witnessed techniques like Susanoo or would release firsthand, his obsession might have reached an entirely different level. Hayashi quickly refocused. After several more exchanges, he gradually grasped Kagaya Hikari's combat rhythm. With Shikosumiyaku as its foundation, a Kagaya clan ninja possessed strength comparable to an elite jonin. However, their flaw was just as clear. Their combat style was overwhelmingly focused on taijutsu. Against an opponent like that, unless one reached the level of someone like Might Guy, the path to victory was straightforward. Damn it! Realizing he was being steadily suppressed, Kagaya Hikari roared in rage and fired his finger bones once again. Hayashi sidestepped smoothly. At the same time, Hikari accelerated forward, bones spiraling widely from his left arm until they fused into a massive, cone-shaped killing weapon. Shikosumiaku, Dance of the Clematis. The attack erupted with terrifying speed. By the time the technique was fully formed, the spiral bone had already reached Hayoshi's chest, only inches from his heart. Hit him. Kill him. Hayoshi could read those thoughts clearly in Hikari's bloodthirsty eyes. The Kagaya clan truly existed for battle alone. Yet at that critical moment, Hayoshi did not retreat. Hikari's arm froze in midair, the tip of the bone halted at Hayoshi's chest, unable to advance even a millimeter. Their eyes met. In that instant, a Sharingan genjutsu struck. Hayoshi instinctively reached for a kunai, intending to sever his opponent's head. Seeing the dense mass of bones protecting Hikari's neck, he abandoned the attempt and stepped back instead. Chakra gathered rapidly in his hand, compressed to its limit. In a heartbeat, it reached the familiar state accompanied by the piercing chirp of 1,000 birds. But he did not stop there. More chakra was forced in, refining and sharpening the technique beyond its original form. Lightning Cutter. The super-dense bones created by Shikosumiaku formed an incredible defense. Even an A-rank technique like Kaidori struggled to break through, something Hayoshi had just experienced firsthand. If the strike failed to kill, the pain would snap the mist ninja out of the genjutsu. At this distance, that would invite a deadly counterattack. So Hayoshi committed completely. The lightning blade slid forward without resistance, cutting through bone as if it were soft clay and piercing straight into Kagaya Hikari's heart. As for why he did not strike the head, there was a reason. He intended to leave Orochimaru a complete specimen. After sealing the body into a scroll, Hayoshi turned and headed toward the other battlefield. Fortunately, Mikoto was safe. When he arrived, she had only suffered minor injuries. As for Himeji, she had already finished her fight and was now watching from a large tree. Hayoshi used the body flicker technique, appeared beside her, and quietly sat down on the branch. Why had Himeji not intervened? Because real combat was the best form of training for a ninja. Mikoto could not always rely on others. And why had Himeji not helped Hayoshi? Because she had absolute confidence in his strength. So the two remained where they were, calmly observing as Mikoto finished her battle. A forest was ideal terrain for a Konoha ninja. With the enhanced perception of her Sharingan, Mikoto held a clear advantage. The battlefield had already been filled with thin, nearly invisible wires, crisscrossing the area like a spider's web. How she had managed to set them up in the middle of combat was anyone's guess. Her opponent, clearly another mist ninja judging by his equipment, was only a Chunin and had already been forced on the defensive. Fire release, dragon flame technique. After a brief taijutsu exchange, Mikoto disengaged. In that instant, her hand seals were completed. A massive stream of fire erupted from her mouth, racing along the pre-laid wires and igniting the entire area in a roaring inferno. Using terrain and preparation to amplify a jutsu like this went far beyond the standard of an ordinary Chunin. It was exceptional. Within the sea of flames, Mikoto deliberately left a single narrow escape route. The trap mist ninja spotted it. With the fire closing in and his space rapidly shrinking, he had no time to think. He lunged toward that opening. At that moment, the crackle of lightning release sharpened into the familiar chirp of 1,000 birds. With Mikoto's Tutomo Sharingan locked firmly onto him, exposing his back was a death sentence. That path was never meant for escape. It was the victor's exit. Lightning chakra erupted as Mikoto pushed her speed to its limit. Without hesitation, she drove straight through him. Hayoshi clapped softly in approval. In his eyes, 12-year-old Mikoto was already stronger than Sasuke had been during the Chunin exams. Of course, as Indra's reincarnation, Sasuke's talent was undeniable. So in the end, the difference came down to timing and guidance. Chapter 310, Ambush in the Forest. 1,489 words. There was a possibility of encountering mist ninjas during the mission, and Hayoshi was prepared for that. However, he had assumed such an encounter would happen only after reaching Mahana Town or finding Ryoma, not here in these woods deep within the Land of Fire. As the third Hokage had explained, the mist ninjas wanted to accomplish something through the former daimyo's son. A logical tactic would be to stay close to the target, not suddenly strike in the forest without warning. What made this even stranger was that this mist squad had crossed paths with Team 1, the group assigned to this mission. Keep in mind that Himeji's scouting range was only 1 kilometer, and this forest stretched far beyond that. Unless this was an intentional ambush, the odds of such a random encounter were nearly zero. There was one other possibility. The hidden mist could have sent a large force, lying in wait specifically for leaf shinobi in these woods. But that would be more than some trick or strategy. That would be a full-scale attack. And considering the current state of affairs, after the Fourth Shinobi World War, the Leaf Village had come out stronger than ever. No nation would provoke them at such a critical moment. It didn't make sense. It was as if a cautious master strategist, always playing it safe to survive, suddenly cast aside caution entirely, pulled out a powerful weapon, and chose to fight head-on against the most formidable opponent. In situations like this, there was only one obvious conclusion: the enemy was using some kind of cheat. Whether the hidden mist had such an advantage, Hayashi couldn't say for sure. But even if they did, what would it matter? They hadn't participated in the Great War. What impact could these tricks possibly have now? Even if their attack succeeded, it wouldn't cause any real damage to the Leaf Village. At most, it would irritate them. And besides Onoki, no one in the ninja world acted out of such senseless hostility. Furthermore, there was no political conflict between the Leaf and the Mist. The third Mizukage would have to be out of his mind to order something like this. And the most confusing part of all was this squad's leader. He was from the Kagaya clan. The Kagaya were known for their unpredictable temperaments. Why would the Mizukage assign such a volatile shinobi to an important task? It made no sense. Based on the brief clash they had just endured, Hayashi concluded that their enemy wasn't a thinker, he was a warrior driven by bloodlust. Sending someone like that was practically guaranteeing failure. In short, everything about this situation was suspicious. As the sky darkened toward evening, Hayashi led Mikoto and Himeji to set up a camp a little distance away from where their skirmish had taken place. After briefly surveying the surrounding area, he placed numerous rudimentary traps and several summon snakes around their perimeter before returning, carrying a freshly caught game bird. "Here," Hayashi said, offering the bird to Mikoto. Mikoto nodded and, with a quiet efficiency that reminded Himeji of a dutiful partner rather than a comrade, began preparing the bird for roasting. Himeji, busy setting up the tent, glanced over and asked, "Didn't you say yesterday we shouldn't make open fires near Mahana town?" "Yes," Hayashi confirmed as he used earth release to form a simple seat before sitting down. "So what's this? Why are we cooking a fire now instead of just eating our rations?" Himeji responded while continuing her work, curiously turning an ear toward him for his explanation. Hayashi smiled just a little and said, "Before, we hadn't seen any enemies around here yet, and we didn't know what we were walking into. So we had to be cautious. But now that we've already fought, if there were mist shinobi nearby they would have discovered us by now. There's no hiding anymore." His eyes shifted slightly with teasing logic. "Besides," he continued, "I'd rather they find us now. How are they supposed to locate us if we don't give off any traces?" He then explained all the odd aspects of this mission, the questions plaguing him since the encounter. Himeji thought for a moment, setting another support peg into the earth before saying, "So what you're doing is testing the waters." "That's right," Hayashi replied with a nod. "I've placed a number of summon snakes all around. If there are many mist shinobi, we'll fall back. If there aren't, then we handle them head-on. Lighting a small fire tonight shouldn't be an issue. If we can be more comfortable, why should we settle for dry rations?" Himeji hummed with agreement, then resumed erecting the tent's final poles. She realized in that moment that she still had much to learn. Even though she was 3 years older than Hayashi, his composure and strategic thinking far surpassed hers. After a moment of silence, Hayashi said casually, "Oh right, Himeji, there's something else I wanted to ask." What is it?" she replied, hand still securing the tent fabric. "Do you know that Kagaya shinobi from earlier? The one we clashed with? I'd say he was at least an elite jonin, and his position within the Kagaya should be high." Himeji thought carefully before answering, "I've never seen him before. Our Hyuga clan has maintained good relations with the Kagaya for generations, but that was more common before the founding of the villages. Ever since the shinobi system was established, contact between our clans has become less frequent. The last time I saw a Kagaya ninja was 5 years ago." "5 years ago?" Hayashi repeated. "Yes," she continued. "There was a family celebration then. My eldest brother was named successor of the main house, and my second brother became the successor of the branch house. The Kagaya came to congratulate us." Hayashi narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking. "But if your clans have historically been on good terms," he asked, "why would a Kagaya be so ferocious in battle?" Himeji shook her head, "I'm not entirely sure. That sort of history has been passed down by our elders for generations. The Kagaya themselves have similar teachings about their own traditions. Does your clan have stories like that too?" Hayashi scratched the back of his head awkwardly and offered a wry smile. Yes, we do, he admitted. Our old clan teachings used to say, eliminate the senju. Himeji paused mid-knot. Yes, that's what they said, Hayashi continued quickly, trying to ease the tension. But it's not as crude as it sounds. Our clans fought for over 1,000 years before the shinobi villages were formed. Hatred only began to fade after the villages were established and peace became important. Before Himeji could respond, Mikoto, having finished preparing their meal, walked over carrying the game bird now ready for roasting. She set the bird against a simple frame and sat beside Hayashi. From her pouch she produced a scroll, made the necessary seals, and with a soft shimmer a bag filled with special seasonings appeared. Hayashi immediately responded by forming the required seals of his own. With controlled chakra, he conjured a modest but steady flame. Mikoto skewered the bird and placed it over the fire. As the sun dipped lower, the rich scent of roasting meat filled the air, coaxing an involuntary hunger from Hayashi. By the time Himeji finished washing her hands with clear water, Mikoto called out with a soft, "Dinner's ready." Though their meal was simple, Mikoto's skill was evident. Every twist of the meat and adjustment of the flame ensured the bird cooked evenly, its skin turning a mouth-watering golden brown. Hayashi knew all too well, if he skipped a meal prepared by Mikoto for just one day, he'd regret it. That used to be a frequent complaint from Nawaki. Hayashi, Nawaki would grumble, "You're dying for good food again." It's a rich man's problem, if you ask me. But these days, Hayashi didn't pay such jokes much mind. After all, Nawaki was always quick to nag about anything and everything. They ate in relative silence at first, the simple comfort of warm food grounding them after the earlier conflict. Eventually, Himeji spoke softly, "Your explanation, it makes sense." Hayashi nodded at her, offering a modest smile in return. "It's not just about survival," he said, "it's about making sure we're prepared for whatever comes next. This mission isn't normal. Something's off, more than we can see so far." Himeji dipped her head, considering his words while taking another bite. Mikoto, ever observant, had already finished her own dinner and was quietly watching her two allies, her expression thoughtful. But no one spoke further about the strange facts of their encounter, not yet. They simply ate, letting the warmth of the fire chase away the chill of uncertainty that had settled in their bones. For tonight, at least, they were safe. ________. White right pointing backhand index patreon.com/zphyr. Chapter 311, 311, Under the Moonlight. 994 words. After eating their fill, the bonfire's flames had dwindled somewhat. Although it was still early, there was no need to add more firewood. The three of them sat on their stools, gazing up through the branches at the deep night sky. The moon shone brightly, though the dense branches divided the light, creating a tapestry of shadow and silver across the forest floor. This kind of scene was rare in Konoha. The village was simply too bustling, too lively. In such an environment, it was impossible to feel truly at peace. Over the years, Hayashi had only felt this calm in Maito's small courtyard, though it was a pity that the courtyard remained empty, the person who had lived there had passed away long ago. After a pause, Mikoto tilted her head and asked softly, "Hayashi, do you think there are people on the moon?" "Yes," he answered simply. "How do you know?" "If the land beneath our feet can nurture life, the moon can too," he replied. Mikoto pursed her lips, clearly not entirely satisfied with his answer. Hayashi gave her a gentle pat on the head and smiled. "I read an old family scroll once. It said that in ancient times, there was no moon." "And then?" Mikoto pressed. "The Sage of Six Paths created the moon," Hayashi said calmly. Mikoto covered her mouth and giggled. "That's just a myth, right, Himeji?" Himeji, who had been quietly observing the sky, tilted her head to listen. She softly hummed in acknowledgement but said nothing. Hayashi smiled but offered no correction. The events were so far in the past that the Sage of Six Paths seemed more legend than reality. To most, tales of his deeds, including creating the moon, were beyond comprehension. It was like being told that humans were crafted by some deity, one would nod politely and laugh it off as story. Myths in all civilizations were often moral tales, passed down and exaggerated over generations. Most people simply assumed they were fictional, not historical. Hayashi poked the embers of the fire thoughtfully. Yet myths often have roots in reality. Legends come from history, he muttered to himself. Stories change as they pass through human hands, becoming distorted over time. But some things did really happen, even if no one knows the original truth. He was just an ordinary shinobi, naturally unable to verify the ancient myths or know the number of lovers Sun Wukong supposedly had. But reborn in the ninja world, he held knowledge that few could match. He could have been a charlatan of incredible renown if he wanted, like the Toad Sage. But those days were gone. His recklessness in the past had drawn the attention of the Time and Space Administration, who sealed his ability to foresee events. Now he could only work as a ninja historian, scraping by on what he knew. Still, he thought, I am one of the few in the world who know some truths. At least, I won't be fooled like Madara. The thought brought a wry shake of his head. Madara's life had been a desperate pursuit of myths, the Rinnegan, the Ten Tails, the infinite Tsukuyomi. He had risked everything for words carved on a stone tablet, dragging his friends along for the ride. Hayashi imagined that night at the Naka shrine. Madara holding Hashirama by one hand, pointing to the tablet with the other, preaching fanaticism about combined power and creation. It was like a friend suddenly claiming you were descended from a dragon, capable of awakening an ultimate bloodline. Would anyone leave behind all they had to follow that? The first Hokage had chosen wisely. He was practical, with a vast village to govern and a family to protect. He refused to chase impossible dreams. That night, he and Madara parted ways, their friendship fractured forever. History proved Madara wrong, the things he sought were only wishful thinking. Noticing the distant melancholy on Hayashi's face, Mikoto reached out, holding his hand gently. What are you thinking about? Hayashi didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, Mikoto, do you think we could create a moon, like the Sage of Six Paths did? How could that be possible? Humans can't do something like that, she replied softly. The Sage of Six Paths, he was just a very skilled ninja, Hayashi said, shaking his head with a faint smile. Inwardly, he mused, Newer, if she existed, was just a human who had maxed out her abilities. Himeji, who had been listening quietly, suddenly turned to him, eyes wide. If you could create a moon, could you make one for me? No problem, Hayashi said with a smile, nodding. Maybe your family originally came from the moon. Why would you say that? Himeji asked, curious. Hayashi pointed to the moon in the night sky. Doesn't it remind you of your family's eyes? Himeji paused, speechless, and Mikoto giggled softly at the quiet moment between them. For a while, the three of them continued talking under the moonlight. Around 8 o'clock, Hayashi finally said, rest now. We have to keep moving early tomorrow. Himeji gave him a quick glance and wordlessly walked toward the tent. Mikoto, however, lingered, dragging her feet as if reluctant to leave. Go on, be obedient, Hayashi said lightly, smiling. After seeing Mikoto settle in, Hayashi took out a scroll and carefully reviewed it by the dim glow of the fire. Originally, they had planned to take turns keeping watch, but tonight was unusual, and he didn't bother. Staying awake all night was of little consequence to him anyway. As dawn arrived, a faint mist rolled quietly through the forest, seeping into every corner. The night had passed peacefully. No mist ninjas appeared, and nothing unusual occurred. Was it really just a coincidence? Hayashi didn't dwell on it. He woke the two girls, they ate quickly, and resumed their journey. By morning, the trio arrived at Mahana Town, ready to continue their mission. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Novels Wonderland.